At 4 a.m., Emily Carter put the final touch on a wedding cake that took 61 hours to create. By noon, her own sister would claim it as someone else's work. By evening, her father would hand her an eviction notice in front of 200 guests. And by midnight, 3 black cars would pull up to that perfect wedding, and a man the entire city feared would walk through those doors. Not for the bride, not for the celebration, but for the invisible girl everyone had forgotten was even there. If you're watching, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far Emily's story travels. Now let me tell you how a wedding cake became a declaration of war. The kitchen was silent except for the hum of the industrial refrigerator and Emily's careful breathing. Her hands moved with the kind of precision that came from years of being told that good enough wasn't good enough. Not for a Carter, not for Ashley's wedding, not for anything that might reflect on the family name. She stepped back from the 5-tier lemon honey masterpiece, her vision blurring slightly from exhaustion. 61 hours. She'd worked 61 hours straight, sleeping in 20-minute intervals on the flour-dusted floor, her back against the storage closet door. Her fingers ached. Her shoulders burned. There was buttercream under her nails and a permanent crease between her eyebrows from concentration. But it was perfect. Hand-painted sugar flowers cascaded down each tier, magnolias and gardenias, New Orleans blooms rendered so delicately they seemed to tremble in the fluorescent light. The lemon curd filling was balanced with local honey from the French Quarter, the buttercream light enough to melt on the tongue but structured enough to hold in Louisiana's humid heat. Every detail had been considered, reconsidered, perfected. Emily allowed herself one small moment of pride before she heard footsteps on the stairs. "You're still here?" Her mother's voice carried that particular tone of disappointment that Emily had learned to recognize before she could spell her own name. Margaret Carter appeared in the doorway, already dressed in her mother-of-the-bride champagne silk, diamonds glittering at her throat. "I thought you'd be gone by now. I wanted to make sure everything was—" "The cake looks fine." Margaret didn't even glance at it. "You need to go home and make yourself presentable. The wedding starts at 2. Emily nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. "Fine. The cake looked fine. Not beautiful, not extraordinary. Fine. And Emily?" Her mother paused, one hand on the doorframe. "The dress I had sent over. Wear it. Don't improvise." "I will. I mean it. No substitutions. Ashley specifically requested—" She stopped herself, mouth tightening. "Just wear the dress." After her mother left, Emily stood alone with her cake for another few minutes. She touched one of the sugar magnolias, so light it barely registered against her fingertip. In another life, in another family, someone might have asked her how she'd made them. Someone might have said, "Thank you." She gathered her things and locked up the bakery kitchen she'd been renting for the past 3 years. The sun was rising over the French Quarter, painting the narrow streets in shades of gold and amber. Emily walked the 6 blocks to her apartment, a cramped studio above a closed antique shop, and found the garment bag hanging on her door. The dress inside made her stomach drop. It was pink, not the soft blush of the bridesmaids' dresses, but an aggressive, artificial hot pink that would photograph like a warning sign. The cut was wrong for her body, too tight through the hips, too loose through the bust, with cap sleeves that would dig into her shoulders. The fabric was cheap polyester that would make her sweat. There was a note pinned to the hanger in Ashley's handwriting, "Wear this. Don't embarrass me." Emily sat on the edge of her bed, the dress pooled in her lap, and tried to remember the last time Ashley had spoken to her without that edge of contempt. Maybe when they were children. Maybe before Ashley realized that being beautiful and charming could get you everything, and being quiet and forgettable got you nothing. She should refuse. She should wear something else, something that fit, something that didn't make her look like she dressed in the dark as a joke. But refusing meant confrontation. It meant attention. It meant standing up in front of Margaret and explaining why she couldn't just wear what she'd been told to wear. And Emily had learned a long time ago that explaining yourself to people who had already decided you were wrong was just another form of humiliation. She wore the dress. By 1:30, she was standing in the back of St. Louis Cathedral, tugging at the too tight bodice, trying to disappear into the stone walls. The cathedral was full, 200 guests, maybe more, all of New Orleans society packed into the pews. The Carters knew how to throw a wedding. The Carters knew how to throw anything that required appearances, performance, the careful maintenance of a family legacy built on old money and older secrets. Emily found a spot near a side alcove, partially hidden by a marble pillar. From here, she could see the altar, the banks of white roses, the string quartet playing something elegant and forgettable. She could see Ashley at the back of the cathedral, radiant in a custom Vera Wang gown, their father beside her looking every inch the proud patriarch. She could see everything and be seen by no one. The ceremony was beautiful in the way that expensive things often are, polished, perfect, utterly devoid of spontaneity. Ashley's fiancé, Marcus Beaumont, came from the kind of family that made the Carters look middle class. His smile was practiced. His vows were eloquent. The whole thing felt like a performance they'd rehearsed until every gesture looked natural. Emily felt something twist in her chest, and she hated herself for it. Not jealousy. She didn't want Marcus, didn't want a cathedral wedding, didn't want any of this. But watching Ashley move through the ceremony like she was born for this moment, like happiness was just another thing she'd inherited along with the family name and the trust fund, Emily couldn't help but wonder what it felt like to take up space in the world without apologizing for it. The reception was held at the family estate in the Garden District, a sprawling antebellum mansion that Margaret kept in museum condition. The gardens had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. Thousands of white lights strung through the oak trees, linen-draped tables scattered across the lawn, a band playing jazz standards while waiters circulated with champagne. And at the center of it all, on a table decorated with more of those perfect white roses, stood Emily's cake. She stopped at the edge of the garden, staring at it. It looked different here somehow, elevated. The setting sun caught the sugar flowers, making them glow. People were already gathering around it, phones out, taking pictures. She heard someone say it was from a bakery in Paris. Someone else said it cost $15,000. Stunning, isn't it? Emily turned to find a woman in a silver cocktail dress smiling at her, Diane Marchand, one of her mother's bridge club friends. Yes, Emily said quietly. It's beautiful. Ashley has such exquisite taste. I asked Margaret for the bakery's information, but she said it was a closely guarded secret, some exclusive French patisserie. Diane laughed, the sound light and careless. I told her I'd fly to Paris myself if it meant having a cake like that for my daughter's wedding. Emily opened her mouth, closed it. The words were right there. I made it. I spent 61 hours making it. I know the name of every ingredient and the exact temperature of the oven when I baked each tier, but they stuck in her throat like fish bones. Excuse me, she managed, and slipped away before Diane could continue. She found herself drifting through the party like a ghost, present but unseen. She watched the toasts. Marcus's best man telling a rehearsed story about their college days. Ashley's maid of honor delivering a speech full of inside jokes Emily didn't understand. She watched the first dance, the cake cutting, her cake, her work, her 61 hours reduced to a photo opportunity. The carefully choreographed moments that would be preserved in a wedding album and forgotten by everyone except the people who had to live through them. No one spoke to her. A few people nodded in her direction, the kind of vague acknowledgement you give to someone you can't quite place. Her mother passed by twice without making eye contact. Her father was too busy playing host, shaking hands, accepting congratulations on his daughter's excellent match. Emily had perfected the art of invisible endurance. She knew how to stand in a corner and look occupied, how to nurse a single glass of champagne for hours, how to smile blandly when someone's eyes skipped past her to find someone more interesting. She'd been doing it her whole life. But then Ashley took the microphone. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, her sister said, radiant under the string lights, Marcus's arm around her waist. This has been the most perfect day, and I'm so grateful to everyone who made it possible. She went through a list, the wedding planner, the florist, the band, their parents. Emily waited for her name, told herself she wasn't waiting, told herself it didn't matter. And of course, Ashley continued, her smile widening, I have to thank the incredible Maison Bellerose for creating the most stunning wedding cake I've ever seen. I mean, just look at it. The crowd turned to admire the cake again. Emily felt the blood drain from her face. Maison Bellerose. A bakery that didn't exist. A name Ashley had just invented, probably, to avoid admitting that her awkward little sister had created something beautiful. Actually, Ashley's voice took on a lighter tone, almost playful. I should probably thank my sister Emily for picking it up. She's the one who drove all the way to the airport to collect it this morning. Laughter rippled through the crowd, gentle, indulgent. Emily's role reduced to a punchline, an errand girl, someone useful enough to fetch things, but not significant enough to be credited with creating them. Ashley's eyes found her in the crowd. For just a second, Emily saw something flicker in her sister's expression. Not malice, exactly. Something colder. Something that said, "This is your place, and you need to remember it." Emily forced herself to smile, to nod, to accept the story being written over her own work. The party continued. Dinner was served, prime rib and lobster, courses perfectly timed, wine flowing freely. Emily picked at her plate, the too tight dress making it hard to breathe, let alone eat. She counted the minutes until she could leave without causing a scene, without giving anyone a reason to notice her absence. But then her father stood up. Robert Carter commanded attention without effort, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of voice that expected to be obeyed. He tapped his knife against his champagne glass, and the garden fell silent. "I won't keep you long," he said, that practiced smile in place. "But I wanted to say a few words about family." Emily's hand stilled on her lap. "Tonight is a celebration of new beginnings," Robert continued. "Ashley and Marcus are starting their life together, building something that will carry our family name into the future. That's what matters: legacy, strength, the courage to make difficult decisions." He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. They landed on Emily for a fraction of a second, and her stomach tightened. "I've always believed that family means honoring your commitments. It means contributing, not just existing. It means earning your place at the table." Another pause. "Some people understand that. Others need to learn it." The words were general enough that most people probably didn't notice the shift in his tone, but Emily heard it. She felt it like a hand closing around her throat. Her father raised his glass. "To Ashley and Marcus, may they build something worthy of the Carter name." The crowd echoed the toast. Emily lifted her glass mechanically, the champagne bitter on her tongue. She needed to leave, now, before something inside her cracked open in front of all these people. But as she stood, her father appeared at her elbow. "Emily, a word." It wasn't a request. He guided her away from the party, toward the house, his hand firm on her arm. They walked through the side entrance, past the kitchen staff preparing dessert, into his study. A room she'd been inside maybe 5 times in her life, always for lectures, never for conversations. He closed the door. "I've been patient," Robert said without preamble. "More than patient. But patience has limits." Emily's heart was hammering. "I don't understand." "The apartment." He walked to his desk, retrieved an envelope, held it out. "I'm selling the building. The new owners want vacant possession by the end of next month. You'll need to find somewhere else to live." She took the envelope with numb fingers. Inside was an eviction notice, formal and legal and completely unexpected. "You're evicting me?" "I'm selling a property I own. The fact that you happen to rent an apartment there is incidental." His tone was perfectly reasonable, which somehow made it worse. "You've had 3 years to establish yourself, Emily. 3 years of below-market rent, and what do you have to show for it? A part-time bakery job? Student debt you can't pay? You're 26 years old. At some point, you need to take responsibility for your own life." "I am taking responsibility. I've been working at what? Making cakes for other people's celebrations while you live in a studio apartment that I subsidize?" He shook his head. "Your sister has built something. She's married well, she's established herself in society. You're still playing in the kitchen like a child." The words hit like slaps. Emily felt tears burning behind her eyes and forced them back through sheer will. "I made Ashley's cake," she said quietly. "Not Maison Bellerose. Me. I spent 61 hours making it perfect, and no one even... Is that what this is about?" Robert's expression hardened. "You want credit? Recognition?" "Emily, no one cares who made the cake. It's a cake. It's a detail. What matters is the event, the family, the impression we make. You standing in the corner feeling sorry for yourself doesn't change anything." "I'm not feeling sorry for myself." "Then stop acting like the world owes you something for doing the bare minimum." He moved past her to the door, clearly done with the conversation. "You have 30 days. I suggest you use them productively." Emily stood alone in her father's study, the eviction notice trembling in her hands, and felt something inside her finally, irrevocably break. She walked back to the party on autopilot, found her purse, ignored the looks from guests who were starting to notice her distress. She made it to the edge of the garden before her mother intercepted her. "Where are you going? You can't leave yet." "I need to go home." "Home?" Margaret's laugh was sharp. "This is your sister's wedding, Emily. You'll stay until it's appropriate to leave. You're already barely here. Don't make it worse by running away like a child." "Dad just gave me an eviction notice." Her mother's expression flickered, surprise, then something like resignation. "He mentioned he might. It's time, Emily. You can't expect to live off family charity forever." "Charity?" The word tasted like poison. "I pay rent." "Below market value. And for what? So you can keep pretending you're going to make something of yourself with this baking hobby?" Margaret's voice dropped. Not quite gentle, but not quite cruel. "You're not Ashley, Emily. You're never going to be Ashley. The sooner you accept that and find something realistic to do with your life, the better off you'll be." Emily looked at her mother, really looked at her. At the woman who had spent 26 years making sure Emily knew exactly where she stood in the family hierarchy. At the carefully maintained disappointment that had shaped every conversation they'd ever had. "I need to make a phone call," Emily said. "It can wait until... It can't." She walked away before her mother could stop her, past the gardens, past the valets, out to the street where the evening air felt like breathing for the first time in hours. Her hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts to a number she'd been too afraid to call for 3 months. Adrian Wolfe. They'd met at a charity event, one of those terrible fundraising galas her mother had forced her to attend. Emily had been working the dessert table as a favor to the event coordinator, staying late to clean up after the guests had gone. Adrian had appeared in the empty ballroom like a shadow, startling her badly enough that she'd dropped a tray of champagne flutes. He'd helped her clean up the broken glass. Hadn't said much. Hadn't needed to. There was something about the way he moved, the way people's eyes had tracked him across the room earlier in the evening, that made it clear he wasn't someone you casually dismissed. Before he left, he'd given her his number. "If you ever need help," he'd said, "real help. Not the kind people like your parents give." She hadn't understood what he meant, hadn't wanted to understand, but she'd kept his number. Now she pulled it up, her thumb hovering over the call button. Adrian Wolfe was dangerous. Everyone in New Orleans knew that, even if they pretended not to. He ran things in the city that polite society didn't talk about. He had power that didn't come from old money or family names, but from something darker, something earned through means her father's country club friends would clutch their pearls over. Calling him would mean stepping into a world she didn't understand. It would mean admitting she couldn't handle this alone. It would mean everything her family had ever said about her, that she was weak, dependent, incapable of standing on her own, was true. But standing here in a too-tight dress that her sister had chosen to humiliate her, holding an eviction notice from her own father, Emily realized something. She was already in a world she didn't understand. She'd been living in it her whole life, trying to follow rules that only applied to her, trying to earn love from people who had decided she wasn't worth the effort. She pressed call. He answered on the second ring. "Emily." His voice was exactly as she remembered, low, controlled, with an undercurrent of something that might have been amusement or might have been something far more dangerous. "It's late." "I know. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Where are you?" The question was calm but absolute. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What's wrong?" But where are you? Like the location was all that mattered, like everything else could wait until he had that one piece of information. Emily gave him the address of her family's estate. "Stay there," Adrian said. "I'm coming." "You don't have to." "Emily." He said her name like a period at the end of a sentence. "Stay there." The line went dead. Emily lowered the phone, her heart racing for entirely different reasons now. What had she done? What was she expecting him to do? Show up at her sister's wedding and... what? Fix everything? Make her problems disappear? People like Adrian Wolfe didn't fix problems. They created different ones. But it was too late to take it back. She'd made the call, and now all she could do was wait and see what came next. She walked back toward the garden, staying at the edges, avoiding her family. The party was still in full swing, dancing now, the band playing something upbeat, while Ashley and Marcus moved across the temporary dance floor like they'd been choreographed. Everything perfect, everything exactly as it should be. Emily checked her phone. 20 minutes since she'd called, then 30, then... The music didn't stop exactly, but it faltered. The conversations didn't die, but they lowered, shifted, turned towards something happening at the front of the property. 3 black cars pulled up the circular drive, moving with the kind of precision that suggested this wasn't a random arrival. They were expensive vehicles, the kind you didn't see often in New Orleans unless someone very wealthy or very powerful was in town. The first car stopped. A driver got out, opened the back door, and Adrian Wolfe stepped into the garden like he'd been invited. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than Emily's car, dark and perfectly tailored, no tie. His hair was dark, pushed back from a face that would have been handsome if it weren't for the absolute coldness in his eyes. He moved like someone who had never had to ask permission for anything, who knew that spaces rearranged themselves around him whether he demanded it or not. The crowd parted. Not dramatically, not obviously, but people stepped aside, conversations trailing off, eyes widening with recognition. Emily heard someone whisper his name. Someone else shushed them urgently. Adrian's eyes swept the garden, found her standing near the edge of the crowd, and something in his expression shifted almost imperceptibly. He walked toward her, and the party held its breath. Emily. He stopped in front of her, and suddenly she was aware of how ridiculous she must look. The hot pink dress, her face probably still blotchy from crying, her hair falling out of the pins she'd tried to secure it with. "Are you all right?" The question was quiet, meant only for her, but in the sudden silence of the garden it carried. "I don't know," she admitted. He nodded once, then turned to face the crowd. His gaze found Robert Carter, standing near the bar with several other men, frozen in the middle of a conversation. "Mr. Carter," Adrian said, his voice carrying that same terrible calm. "We need to talk." Her father's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, fear, and finally a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I don't believe we've been introduced." "Adrian Wolfe." He didn't extend his hand. "Your daughter called me." The gasps were audible now. Emily saw her mother's face go pale, saw Ashley grab Marcus's arm. The name Adrian Wolfe meant something to these people, something that made them nervous, made them recalculate the social mathematics of the situation. "I'm not sure what Emily told you," Robert began, clearly scrambling for control. "But this is a private family celebration. Whatever business you think you have, she told me she needed help." Adrian's voice cut through her father's excuses like a knife. "From what I can see, she was right." He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then held it up so the nearest guest could see the screen. Emily couldn't see what it was from where she stood, but she saw the reactions: shock, discomfort, several people looking away. 3 months ago, Adrian said, still holding up the phone, Ashley Carter sent her sister a message. "Would you like me to read it aloud, or should I just share the screenshot?" "That's private," Ashley snapped, stepping forward. "You have no right. You told her she was an embarrassment, that she should stay away from your wedding unless she could learn to look presentable, that she was lucky you even bothered to invite her at all." He lowered the phone, his eyes finding Ashley in the crowd. "Should I go on? I have years of messages. From you, from your mother, from several of your father's associates who seem to think commenting on Emily's appearance and failures is appropriate conversation." The silence was suffocating. Adrian looked at Robert again. "You gave your daughter an eviction notice. Tonight, at her sister's wedding." "That's between Emily and myself," Robert said tightly. "No, it's not." Adrian's voice dropped lower, more dangerous. "Because she called me, which means it's between you and me now." Emily felt like the ground was tilting. This wasn't what she'd expected. She'd thought, what? That Adrian would offer her a place to stay? Some kind of quiet help that wouldn't draw attention? But he'd walked into her family's perfect celebration and started pulling out the foundations like loose threads from a sweater. "Emily," her mother's voice sharp with panic, "tell him this isn't necessary. Tell him we can work this out as a family." Emily looked at her mother, at her father, at Ashley, who had gone very pale, her perfect wedding suddenly contaminated by something she couldn't control. She thought about 61 hours, about a cake no one credited her for, about a dress chosen to humiliate her, and a lifetime of being told she wasn't quite good enough to matter. "No," Emily said quietly. The word felt strange in her mouth, small but complete. What? Margaret stepped closer. Emily, don't be dramatic. Whatever you think happened, I made the cake. Emily's voice was trembling but audible. I made Ashley's wedding cake. I spent 61 hours making it perfect. I sourced the honey from the French Quarter. I hand-painted every sugar flower. And Ashley told everyone it came from a bakery in Paris because giving me credit would ruin the story she wants to tell about her perfect wedding. Ashley's mouth opened, closed. And that would be fine, Emily continued, the words coming faster now. If it was just the cake. But it's not. It's everything. Every family dinner where I'm seated at the end of the table. Every holiday where my accomplishments get mentioned as an afterthought. Every time Mom introduces me to her friends as the quiet one like it's a character flaw instead of a survival skill. Emily, Robert warned. But something had broken loose inside her and she couldn't stop now. You gave me an eviction notice at my sister's wedding. You told me I was living off family charity when I pay rent every month. Below market, yes, because you're the one who set the price. You told me I need to take responsibility for my life while simultaneously making sure I can never build anything stable because you might pull the rug out whenever you decide I haven't earned it. Her father's face had gone red. You're making a scene. Good. The word came out fierce, surprising even her. Let me make a scene. Let everyone here see what it looks like when the invisible Carter daughter finally has something to say. Adrian was watching her with something that might have been approval, or maybe just interest. It was hard to tell with him. Emily turned to Ashley. I'm sorry your wedding got interrupted. I'm sorry I couldn't just stay quiet and let you have your perfect day. But I'm done being sorry for existing in your shadow. She reached down, slipped off the uncomfortable heels her mother had insisted matched the dress, and held them in one hand. I'm leaving now, she said to no one in particular, and I won't be coming back. She started walking toward the cars, barefoot on the garden path, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Behind her, she heard her father start to say something, but Adrian's voice cut through whatever threat or command he'd been forming. If you come after her, Adrian said calmly, if you contact her, if you send anyone to contact her on your behalf, I will take it personally, and you don't want that. Emily didn't look back to see her father's reaction. She kept walking until she reached the first black car, where a driver was already holding the door open. She hesitated for just a second. This was it. The moment she couldn't take back, then climbed inside. The leather seats were cool against her skin. The door closed with the solid, expensive sound. Through the tinted window, she could see the garden, the white lights, the perfect decorations, the frozen tableau of her family's shock. Adrian slid into the seat beside her. Where to? He asked. Emily opened her mouth to say she didn't know, that she hadn't thought this through, that maybe this was all a mistake. Instead, she said, anywhere but here. The car pulled away from the estate, leaving behind the only life she'd ever known, and Emily pressed her forehead against the window, watching the lights of New Orleans blur past through tears she hadn't realized she was crying. She'd done it. She'd walked away. And she had absolutely no idea what came next. The car moved through the garden district in silence, the streetlights casting moving shadows across Adrian's face. Emily kept her eyes on the window, watching the mansions give way to smaller houses, then commercial streets, then the darker edges of the city where tourists didn't venture after dark. She should have been afraid. She was in a car with a man whose reputation made hardened criminals nervous, heading to an unknown destination, having just burned every bridge she had to the only life she'd ever known. Fear would have been the rational response. Instead, she felt numb, hollowed out, like someone had reached inside her chest and removed something essential, leaving only empty space behind. You didn't have to do that, she said finally, her voice rough. At the wedding, you didn't have to say all that. Adrian was quiet for a moment, his hands folded in his lap with a stillness that somehow seemed more deliberate than relaxation. Yes, I did. Why? Because you wouldn't have. The truth of that hit harder than she expected. He was right. She could have stood there with those messages in her own phone, could have defended herself, could have named the cruelty for what it was, and she would have stayed silent, would have swallowed it down and convinced herself it wasn't that bad, that she was being too sensitive, that making a scene would only prove her family right about her being dramatic and difficult. Where are we going? She asked. My place. You'll stay there tonight. He glanced at her. Tomorrow we'll figure out something more permanent. If you want. I can't. I don't have any way to pay you back. I'm not asking you to. The car turned down a narrow street in the warehouse district, stopping in front of a converted industrial building that looked like it had once housed a shipping company. The driver opened Emily's door, and she stepped out onto the sidewalk, still holding her shoes. The building's exterior was all exposed brick and steel-framed windows, the kind of intentional decay that meant someone with money had decided industrial was fashionable. Adrian led her through a heavy door, past a security desk where a man in a dark suit nodded at them without comment, to a freight elevator that groaned its way up to the top floor. His apartment was nothing like what she'd expected. She'd imagined something ostentatious, maybe dark leather and expensive art, the kind of space designed to intimidate. Instead, it was almost austere. High ceilings with exposed beams, polished concrete floors, furniture that looked comfortable rather than impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Mississippi River, the water black and endless under the night sky. "Guest rooms down the hall," Adrian said, shrugging out of his jacket. "Bathrooms stocked. Take whatever you need." Emily stood in the middle of the living room, suddenly aware of how ridiculous she must look in the hot pink dress. Barefoot, her hair a mess. "I should probably call someone. Let people know where I am." Who would you call? The question wasn't cruel, just practical. Who would she call? Her mother, who'd made it clear Emily had embarrassed the family by leaving. Her father, who'd handed her an eviction notice without a second thought. Ashley, whose wedding she'd ruined. She had friends, technically. People from culinary school she hadn't talked to in months. A few acquaintances from the bakery where she worked part-time. But no one who would pick up the phone at 11 at night. No one who would understand what had just happened. No one who would care beyond the social obligation of caring. No one, she admitted. Adrian moved to the kitchen, which was separated from the living area by a long marble counter. "You hungry?" "I don't think I could eat." "When's the last time you did?" "Eat, I mean." Emily tried to remember. She'd had coffee that morning, maybe some crackers while she was working on the cake. Nothing at the wedding. Her stomach had been too tight with anxiety to handle the elaborate meal. "Yesterday, I think." He pulled open the refrigerator. "Sit down." "You don't have to—" "Emily." He looked at her over the refrigerator door, and there was something in his expression that made her stop mid-protest. "Sit down." She sat on one of the bar stools at the counter, watching as he moved through the kitchen with surprising efficiency. He wasn't cooking exactly, just assembling things. Bread from a bakery she recognized. Good cheese, some kind of charcuterie, olives, sliced fruit. He set the plate in front of her along with a glass of water. "Eat what you can," he said. Emily picked up a piece of bread, mostly because refusing seemed more difficult than complying. The first bite made her realize how hungry she actually was. The second made her stomach wake up and start demanding more. She ate mechanically, not really tasting anything, while Adrian leaned against the counter and watched the river through the windows. "Can I ask you something?" Emily said after a while. "Yes." "Why did you give me your number, that night at the charity gala? You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything." Adrian was quiet long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "I know what it looks like when someone's drowning in plain sight." Emily set down the cheese she'd been holding. "What does that mean?" "You were working that dessert table like you were trying to disappear into it. Every time someone spoke to you, you flinched. And when your mother came over to tell you the centerpieces needed adjusting, like you were staff, not her daughter, you just nodded and did it." He looked at her then, his dark eyes unreadable. "I've seen that before. People who've learned that the safest thing to do is take up as little space as possible." "That's not—" Emily stopped, because it was exactly that. She had spent 26 years making herself smaller, quieter, less troublesome. Being good at disappearing because being noticed meant being criticized. Being noticed meant falling short of expectations she could never meet. "How did you know my mother?" she asked instead. "I didn't, but I know her type." He picked up an olive, examined it. "People like that. They need someone to diminish. Makes them feel bigger. Your mother looked at you like you were an inconvenience she'd been too polite to get rid of." Emily felt something crack in her chest. "She's not—" She didn't mean— Yes, she did. The words were quiet but absolute. No room for argument, no softening. Just the truth laid out like broken glass. Emily looked down at her hands, still holding a piece of bread she'd forgotten she was eating. I kept thinking if I just worked hard enough, if I was just good enough at something, they'd see me differently. My dad especially. He always valued achievement, results. So I thought if I could just make something perfect, create something undeniable, he'd have to acknowledge it. The cake. 61 hours. I planned it for 3 months. Tested every component. I maxed out my credit card on ingredients. She laughed, and it came out bitter. And Ashley told everyone it came from Paris. Your father knew you made it. It wasn't a question. Emily looked up at Adrian, saw the certainty in his expression. How do you know that? Because he gave you the eviction notice tonight specifically. Not last week, not next month. Tonight at the wedding, after you'd done something that should have earned you recognition. Adrian set down the olive uneaten. He knew exactly what he was doing, making sure you understood that even when you succeed, it doesn't matter. That's how people like him maintain control. Emily felt tears threatening again and blinked them back hard. She was so tired of crying, so tired of feeling like everything she did was inadequate. I don't know what to do now, she admitted. I don't have a place to live. I have maybe $2,000 in my bank account. I dropped out of culinary school because I couldn't afford it, so I don't even have a degree. I work 20 hours a week at a bakery that pays minimum wage, and I rent kitchen space to take custom orders that barely cover the cost of supplies. What do you want to do? The question caught her off guard. What do you mean? If money wasn't an issue, if your family's opinion didn't matter, if you could do anything, what would you do? No one had ever asked her that. Her parents had asked what she planned to do about her lack of direction, what she intended to do to make something of herself, what she was going to do to stop being such a disappointment. But no one had asked what she wanted. I'd have my own place, she said slowly. Not a bakery exactly. More like an atelier. Somewhere small and beautiful where I could create custom work. Wedding cakes, celebration cakes, things people actually remember. I'd take my time with each one, make them perfect, put my name on them. She stopped, feeling foolish. That's stupid. There's no way I could afford. It's not stupid. It's unrealistic. Most good things are. Adrian moved around the counter, took the stool next to hers. He was close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive, cedar and leather. Emily, I'm going to make you an offer. You can say no. In fact, you probably should say no, but I'm going to make it anyway. Her heart started beating faster. Okay. I'll set you up, rent on a space, equipment, supplies, operating capital for the first year. You focus on building something. No strings, no expectations. You don't owe me anything except honesty about whether it's working. Emily stared at him. Why would you do that? Because I can. Because you're good at something and you deserve a chance to prove it. Because your family threw you away, and I have a particular hatred for people who waste potential just to feel powerful. He leaned back slightly. And because if I don't, you'll probably try to go back to them. And that would be a mistake. I wouldn't. You would. In a few weeks, when the money runs out and you're scared, your mother will call. She'll say she's worried about you, that they miss you, that they've talked it over as a family, and they're willing to forgive you for the scene at the wedding if you just come home and be reasonable. Emily wanted to argue, but the scenario felt horribly plausible. And you'll think maybe you overreacted, Adrian continued. Maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe you can set boundaries this time, make it work. So you'll go back, and they'll be nice for a while, and then slowly, so slowly you won't even notice it happening, everything will go back to exactly how it was. Except worse, because now they'll know you tried to leave and came back. They'll know you need them more than they need you. You don't know that. Yes, I do. His voice was flat, final. I've seen it 100 times. The only way you survive people like that is to cut them out completely. No contact, no compromise, no second chances. Emily thought about her father's face tonight, the cold calculation in his eyes when he'd handed her that eviction notice. Thought about her mother's resigned disappointment, like Emily's failure was inevitable and slightly boring. Thought about Ashley, who had looked at her own sister and decided that humiliation was an acceptable price for maintaining a certain story. What's the catch? She asked. Adrian smiled slightly. Smart question. I'm not stupid. No one offers this kind of help without wanting something in return. I want you to succeed. That's the return. He stood, walked back to the windows. I've spent most of my life around people who take things, who see something good and immediately start calculating how to own it, control it, profit from it. You make something beautiful because the work itself matters to you. That's rare. I'd like to see what you could do if someone gave you the space to do it right. It sounded too good to be true. It sounded like the kind of offer that came with invisible strings that would tighten around her throat later. But what was her alternative? Go back to her studio apartment for the next 30 days, then figure out where to live on $2,000 and a part-time salary? Find a roommate, probably. Someone else's couch to sleep on while she figured things out. Work more hours at the bakery, give up on the custom orders, let the dream die slowly while she convinced herself it was the practical choice. I need to think about it, Emily said. Of course. Adrian checked his watch. It's late. Guest room's the second door on the left. We can talk more in the morning. Emily slid off the bar stool, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline from the wedding was wearing off, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness that made even standing upright feel difficult. Adrian? He turned from the windows. Thank you for tonight, for coming when I called. You don't need to thank me. I do. You didn't have to do any of this. Something shifted in his expression, gone too quickly to interpret. Get some sleep, Emily. The guest room was simple, a queen bed with white linens, a dresser, curtains that blocked out the city lights. Emily found a t-shirt in one of the drawers that was clearly meant for guests, changed out of the horrible pink dress, and collapsed onto the bed. She should have been too wired to sleep, should have been replaying the evening, analyzing every moment, spiraling into anxiety about what came next. Instead, she was asleep in minutes, and if she dreamed, she didn't remember it. She woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came back. The wedding, the confrontation, leaving in Adrian's car. Her phone was on the nightstand, plugged into a charger she didn't remember connecting. The screen showed 43 missed calls and over 100 text messages. Emily's stomach tightened. She picked up the phone, scrolled through the notifications. Most were from her mother, increasingly frantic as the night progressed. Several from Ashley. A few from her father, all variations on, "We need to talk immediately." She opened her mother's messages first. "Emily, come home. This is ridiculous. You're embarrassing yourself in this family. That man is dangerous. Whatever he told you, it's not true. Your father is very upset. You need to call him and apologize. I can't believe you would ruin your sister's wedding like this." The messages went on, the tone shifting from anger to manipulation to something approaching concern, then cycling back to anger. Reading them made Emily feel like she was suffocating. Ashley's messages were shorter, sharper. "You're pathetic. Did you really think making a scene would make you matter? You'll come crawling back. You always do." Emily set the phone down before she could read the rest. Her hands were shaking. There was a soft knock at the door. "Yes?" Adrian opened the door enough to look in, clearly checking if she was awake rather than entering without permission. "Coffee's ready. There's breakfast if you want it." "I'll be out in a minute." She washed her face in the bathroom, borrowed a toothbrush still in its packaging from the cabinet, and tried to make herself look like someone who had her life together. It was a losing battle. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair was a mess, and she was wearing a borrowed t-shirt that hung to her knees. In the kitchen, Adrian had set out coffee, pastries from a bakery she recognized as one of the good ones, and what looked like a rental agreement. "What's this?" she asked, pouring herself coffee. "Lease for a space in the French Quarter. Small storefront, good foot traffic, kitchen in the back that needs some equipment upgrades but has solid bones." He pushed the papers toward her. 6 months paid up front. After that, you'll need to be covering rent from revenue, but 6 months should be enough time to establish yourself if you're serious. Emily stared at the papers. When did you? "I made some calls this morning. The space became available yesterday. Previous tenant was a boutique that couldn't make rent. Owners willing to lease to you at a reasonable rate because I vouched for you." "You vouched for me? You barely know me." "I know enough." He sat down across from her, his own coffee untouched. "I know you spent 61 hours on a cake no one thanked you for. I know you paid rent on time every month, even when your father was charging you below market specifically so he could hold it over your head. I know you called me last night instead of just accepting what your family decided you deserved. That's enough." Emily picked up the lease, scanned the details. The rent was shockingly reasonable for the French Quarter. The space was on Chartres Street. Good visibility, right in the heart of where tourists and locals mixed. I can't accept this. Why not? Because I don't know you. Because this is too much. Because I don't understand what you get out of it. Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying her with that unnerving stillness. What do you think I do, Emily? For work, I mean. I don't know. People say... She stopped. They say I'm a criminal, that I run things in this city that shouldn't be run, that I'm dangerous. He said it without emotion, just stating facts. They're right. I am all of those things. I make money in ways your family would clutch their pearls over. I've done things that would horrify you if you knew the details. Emily's heart was racing, but she didn't move. But here's the thing about power, Adrian continued. Real power isn't just about taking. It's about knowing when to invest. Your family had you, someone talented, hardworking, desperate to prove herself, and they treated you like an inconvenience. That's not just cruel. It's stupid. It's wasteful. So this is an investment. Yes, in something good. In someone who might actually do something worthwhile with a chance. He pushed the lease closer. I don't need you to understand my motivations. I don't need you to trust me completely. I just need you to decide if you're brave enough to try. Emily looked at the papers, at the address printed in clean black type, at the signature line waiting for her name. What if I fail? She asked quietly. Then you fail. You'll have tried, at least. That's more than most people can say. My family, if I do this, if I take your help, they'll never forgive me. They were never going to forgive you anyway. You committed the unforgivable sin of being someone they couldn't control. He was right. She knew he was right. Going back meant accepting that she would always be the invisible daughter, the disappointing sister, the one whose achievements could be claimed by others and whose failures were entirely her own. But staying meant stepping into a world she didn't understand with a man whose reputation should terrify her. I need to make a call first, Emily said. Adrian gestured to her phone. Go ahead. She picked it up, scrolled past all the messages from her family, and found the number for the bakery where she worked. Jean-Paul answered on the third ring. Emily? What's wrong? You never call on Sunday. I'm quitting, she said. I know I should give 2 weeks' notice, but I can't. I'm sorry. There was a pause. This is about last night, yes? Your sister's wedding? News traveled fast in New Orleans. How did you know? Everyone knows. The Carter wedding crashed by Adrian Wolfe himself. This is all anyone is talking about. Jean-Paul lowered his voice. Are you safe? Do you need help? The question caught her off guard. Jean-Paul was a good boss, but they weren't close. She'd worked for him for 3 years, always on time, always reliable, never complaining. But she'd also never told him about her family, never explained why she sometimes came in with red eyes, or why she never took days off for holidays. I'm safe, she said. Better than safe. I'm finally doing something for myself. Good. This is good. She could hear the smile in his voice. You are too talented to waste yourself here anyway. You go, you make beautiful things, you put your name on them. And when you need character reference for business license, you call me, yes? Emily felt tears threatening again, but this time they weren't from grief. Thank you, Jean-Paul. No thanks necessary. Now go. Be brave. She hung up and looked at Adrian. I need a pen. He slid one across the table. Emily picked it up, held it over the signature line. Her hand was shaking slightly, but she pressed the pen to paper and wrote her name. Emily Rose Carter. Her full name claiming the space, making it real. Done, she said. Adrian took the lease, folded it precisely, and tucked it into a folder. We'll need to file some paperwork, get you a business license, set up an LLC. I have a lawyer who can handle most of it. Should take about a week. A week? Emily had expected months of bureaucratic nightmares. I know people who can expedite things. Of course he did. Adrian Wolfe knew people who could do anything. What do I do in the meantime? She asked. Plan. Figure out your equipment needs, your suppliers, your menu, what kind of work you want to focus on, whether you want to do walk-in business or exclusively custom orders, how you want to present yourself. He stood, carried his untouched coffee to the sink. and find somewhere to live. You can stay here as long as you need to, but you'll want your own space eventually. Emily thought about her studio apartment, the eviction notice, the 30 days she had left in a place that had never really felt like home anyway. I should go back and get my things before my dad changes the locks. I'll send someone with you. I don't need... Emily. He turned to face her. Your father is not going to be happy about this. Having someone with you is not optional. She wanted to argue that her family wouldn't do anything crazy, that they might be cold but they weren't violent. But she remembered the look on her father's face last night, the way he'd gone very still when Adrian threatened him. Robert Carter was a man used to getting his way, and she'd just publicly defied him in front of half of New Orleans society. Okay, she agreed. Adrian made a call, spoke quietly in French for a minute, then hung up. Marcus will meet you at your apartment in an hour. He'll help you pack and make sure no one bothers you. Marcus? Works for me. Good guy. Won't talk your ear off, but he's reliable. An hour later, Emily was standing outside her studio apartment with a man who looked like he could snap her in half without trying. Marcus was tall, heavily muscled, with a face that suggested he'd seen things that would give normal people nightmares. He also, incongruously, carried a stack of collapsed moving boxes under one arm. Miss Carter, he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. Ready? Emily unlocked the door, and they went inside. The apartment looked exactly as she'd left it, cramped, cluttered with baking supplies, the bed unmade because she'd been in too much of a hurry to care. It was depressing how little she'd accumulated in 3 years. Some clothes, her baking equipment, a few books, a laptop that was more held together by hope than actual structural integrity. I don't have much, she said. Marcus was already opening boxes. Take your time. We're not in a rush. She started with her clothes, packing them efficiently, trying not to think about how few nice things she owned. Everything was either worn from repeated washing or cheap to begin with. The pink dress from last night was still in Adrian's apartment, and she had no intention of ever seeing it again. Her baking supplies took more care. She wrapped each tool individually, packed her notebooks full of recipes and sketches, carefully boxed the few special ingredients she kept on hand. This was her real wardrobe, the things that actually mattered. She was almost done when someone knocked on the door. Marcus moved in front of her immediately, his hand going to something under his jacket. Stay back. It's probably just a neighbor. Stay back, he repeated more firmly. He opened the door and Emily heard her mother's voice. I need to speak with my daughter. Miss Carter isn't receiving visitors, Marcus said calmly. This is my building. Well, my husband's building. You can't keep me from... Yes, ma'am, I can. His tone remained polite, but absolutely unmovable. Miss Carter has asked not to be disturbed. Emily could hear her mother's frustration, the barely contained anger. Part of her wanted to open the door to try one more time to make her mother understand. But she remembered what Adrian had said. They'll be nice for a while, and then everything will go back to exactly how it was. Mom, she called from inside. I don't want to talk right now. Emily Rose Carter, you open this door immediately. The use of her full name, the commanding tone that expected obedience. Emily felt herself starting to comply automatically, her body responding to years of conditioning. Then Marcus said, quietly enough that only Emily could hear, You don't have to. She stopped halfway to the door. Ma'am, Marcus said to Margaret, I'm going to ask you to leave now. Miss Carter will contact you when she's ready. Who do you think you are? You work for that criminal. I'm the person making sure Miss Carter can pack her belongings in peace. Now please step back from the door. There was a long silence. Then Margaret's footsteps retreating down the hall and the sound of the building's exterior door slamming. Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. You okay? Marcus asked. Yeah, thank you. Just doing my job. He picked up one of the boxes. Let's finish up and get you out of here. They loaded everything into Marcus's SUV, 4 boxes total, which seemed pathetic for 3 years of living somewhere. Emily took one last look at the studio apartment, at the place where she'd tried so hard to build something, and felt nothing but relief at leaving it behind. Marcus drove her back to Adrian's building in silence, helped her carry the boxes up to the guest room, and then disappeared with a nod. Emily stood surrounded by her packed life and tried to figure out what to do next. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Equipment supplier list attached. These are the people I use. Tell them you're working with me. They'll give you fair prices. Another buzz. A different number. This is Caroline. Adrian said you might need help with business planning. I'm free Tuesday if you want to meet. Then another. Contractor. Can look at your kitchen space tomorrow. Let me know what time works. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, watching her phone light up with messages from people Adrian had apparently mobilized on her behalf. People who were ready to help her build something because he'd asked them to. It should have felt overwhelming. Should have felt like too much, too fast, like she was being swept along in a current she couldn't control. Instead, it felt like possibility. Like maybe, for the first time in her life, someone was investing in her success instead of her failure. She pulled out her laptop, opened a new document, and started writing. Not a business plan, not yet, just ideas. The kind of cakes she wanted to make, the aesthetic she wanted to create, the name she wanted to put on her work. Emily Carter Atelier. Not trying to hide who she was, not diminishing herself to make other people comfortable. Just her name, clean and simple and undeniable. She was still writing when the sun set over the Mississippi River, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. And for the first time in as long as she could remember, Emily felt something that might have been hope. The storefront on Charter Street looked worse in daylight than Emily had imagined. The previous tenant had left it in a state somewhere between abandoned and actively collapsing. The front window was clouded with grime, the door stuck when she tried to open it, and inside smelled like mildew and something she didn't want to identify. It has potential, Caroline said beside her, which was the kind of thing people said when they were being polite about a disaster. Emily had met Caroline 2 days ago at a coffee shop in the quarter. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and efficient, with the kind of directness that Emily found both intimidating and refreshing. She ran a consulting business helping small companies navigate the nightmare of New Orleans bureaucracy, and apparently owed Adrian some kind of favor significant enough that she'd cleared her schedule to help Emily. "The kitchen's in the back," Caroline continued, leading the way through the narrow space. "Let's see what we're working with." The kitchen was simultaneously better and worse than the front. Better because the bones were solid. Good ventilation, decent layout, industrial-grade electrical that could handle serious equipment. Worse because everything else was either broken or missing. The oven was a rusted shell. The counters were warped. The floor tiles were cracked and stained with substances Emily didn't want to examine too closely. "Well," Emily said, trying to keep her voice steady, "at least there's space." Caroline pulled out her phone, started taking pictures. "Contractor's coming at 2. I'll have him give you a full assessment, but I'm guessing you're looking at $30,000 minimum to get this functional." Emily's stomach dropped. $30,000? Equipment, repairs, cosmetic work to make the front presentable. That's conservative. Caroline tapped something into her phone. Adrian said he'd cover setup costs. He said he'd pay 6 months' rent, not renovations. Did he specify that? Emily tried to remember the exact conversation. He'd said rent, equipment, supplies, operating capital. Had he meant all the renovations too? It seemed like too much. It was already too much. "I can't ask him to—" "You're not asking. He's offering." Caroline looked up from her phone. "Look, I don't know what your relationship is with Adrian, and frankly, it's none of my business. But I've worked with him for 5 years, and he doesn't throw money at things he doesn't believe in. If he's investing in this, it's because he thinks you're worth it." "But why? He barely knows me." Caroline smiled slightly. "That's a question for him, not me. What I can tell you is that you have 2 choices. Accept the help and build something, or spend the next 6 months drowning in logistics and second-guessing yourself until the opportunity dies. Which sounds better?" Put like that, the answer was obvious. Emily walked through the space again, trying to see past the decay to what it could become. The front room was small but not cramped. Big enough for a display case, maybe some small tables, a few seats for people who wanted to linger. The kitchen had room for a professional oven, a good mixer, plenty of counter space for detailed work. She could make this beautiful. She could make this hers. "Okay," Emily said. "Let's do it." The contractor arrived exactly at 2. His name was Vincent, and he looked like someone who'd been working construction since before Emily was born. He walked through the space with a practiced eye, taking measurements, making notes, occasionally muttering in Cajun French. "You want this done right or done fast?" he asked finally. "Right," Emily said. "But I need it functional in 6 months." Vincent scratched his jaw. 6 months is tight, but doable. Depends on permits, depends on inspections, depends on whether we find any nasty surprises behind these walls. He tapped the kitchen wall and a small chunk of plaster fell off. Like that, for instance. How much? Emily asked, bracing herself. 35, maybe 40, if the plumbing's worse than it looks. I can have detailed estimates by Friday. He glanced at Caroline. This is Adrian's project. Yes, Caroline said. Vincent nodded slowly. Then I'll make sure it's done right. He's good people. After he left, Emily turned to Caroline. Does everyone in this city work for Adrian? Not for him, with him. There's a difference. Caroline started packing up her tablet and papers. Adrian helps people who need helping. In return, they remember it. That's how things work here. Favors, relationships, mutual benefit. You'll figure it out. Emily wasn't sure she wanted to figure it out. The idea of owing favors, being part of some network of obligation, made her uncomfortable. But she also wasn't naive enough to think she could build this alone. Over the next 2 weeks, Emily's life became a blur of decisions she didn't feel qualified to make. Cabinet styles, flooring options, equipment specifications, color palettes. Every day brought new questions, new choices, new moments where she had to pretend she knew what she was doing. Caroline helped with most of it, guiding her through decisions without making them for her. Vincent started demolition work, ripping out everything that couldn't be salvaged and revealing the space's actual structure. It was messy and loud and occasionally terrifying when they found problems. But slowly the space started transforming. Emily moved into a small apartment 2 blocks from the storefront, a 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a converted townhouse. Nothing fancy, but clean and hers. Adrian had helped arrange it through another contact, someone who owned the building and was willing to work with her limited budget. She'd protested, again, that she could find her own place. He'd pointed out that she needed to focus on the atelier, not waste time dealing with predatory landlords. He was right, which was becoming a frustrating pattern. She didn't see Adrian much during those first weeks. He'd call occasionally to check in, ask if she needed anything, remind her to eat actual meals instead of just coffee and whatever pastries she stress-baked at midnight. But he didn't hover, didn't demand progress reports, didn't try to control how she spent the money he'd given her. It should have been a relief. Instead, it made her nervous. People didn't help like this without expecting something, and the longer Adrian stayed in the background, the more Emily worried about what the eventual price would be. She was working late at the storefront one night, painting the front room a soft cream that would make the space feel larger, when someone knocked on the door. Emily jumped, nearly dropping the paint roller. Marcus stood outside, holding takeout bags. Adrian thought you might be hungry, he said when she opened the door. Emily looked at the bags, then at Marcus. He sent you to check on me. He sent me to bring you food. Checking on you is just a bonus. Marcus set the bags on the only non-paint covered surface. You're working too late. I'm fine. You look like you haven't slept in 3 days. Creative exaggeration. It's only been 2. Emily wiped her hands on a rag, suddenly aware that she was covered in paint and probably looked as exhausted as she felt. Tell Adrian I appreciate the concern, but I don't need a babysitter. Too late. You've got one. Marcus opened the bags, started unpacking containers. Ty, Adrian said you liked the place on Frenchman Street. He was right. She'd mentioned it once, weeks ago, in passing. The fact that Adrian had remembered made something twist in her chest. Are you going to stand there and watch me eat? Emily asked. Unless you want company, I'm good either way. She did want company, she realized. The past 2 weeks had been lonely in a way she hadn't expected. Working alone, living alone, building something that felt simultaneously exciting and terrifying. She'd gotten used to Adrian's apartment, to the quiet presence of someone else in the space, even if they didn't talk much. You can stay, she said. They ate in the half-finished front room, sitting on upturned buckets because there wasn't any furniture yet. Marcus didn't talk much, which Emily appreciated. He just ate his pad thai and occasionally made observations about the space that were surprisingly insightful. You should put the display case there, he said, pointing to the wall opposite the window. Natural light will hit it in the morning, make everything look better. You know about bakery design? My sister owned a cafe, helped her set it up before... He stopped, something crossing his face, before she sold it. Emily waited, but he didn't elaborate. She understood. Some stories weren't ready to be told. The paint looks good, Marcus said instead. Color's right. Not trying too hard. That's the goal. I don't want it to feel like I'm compensating for something. You're not. You're building something. He stood, started gathering the empty containers. But you need to sleep. This'll still be here tomorrow. He was gone before Emily could argue, leaving her alone with the paint fumes and the growing reality of what she'd committed to. By the end of week 4, the space was starting to look like an actual business. The kitchen had new counters, a professional oven that Vincent had installed with the kind of reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts, and a mixer that Emily had picked out after 2 hours of agonizing research. The front room had fresh paint, new floors, and a display case that had arrived yesterday and taken 3 men to install. Emily stood in the middle of it all, trying to feel accomplished instead of terrified. Her phone rang. Her father. She'd been ignoring his calls for weeks, deleting his voicemails without listening to them, blocking her mother's increasingly aggressive texts. But something made her answer this time. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the need to prove to herself that she could handle a conversation without falling apart. Emily. Robert's voice was controlled, but she could hear the anger underneath. We need to talk. I don't think we do. Don't be childish. This has gone on long enough. Your mother is worried sick. Ashley's still upset about the wedding, and you're making the family look... I don't care, Emily interrupted. Silence on the other end. She'd never interrupted her father before. Excuse me? I don't care how I'm making the family look. I don't care that Ashley's upset. I don't care that Mom's worried. Emily's hand was shaking, but her voice stayed steady. I care about building something that's mine. With money from a criminal. Robert's voice hardened. Do you have any idea what you've gotten yourself into? Who Adrian Wolfe really is? What he does? I know enough. You know nothing. You're playing with fire because you're too stubborn to admit you made a mistake. He paused. Come home, Emily. I'll forgive the eviction notice. We'll find you a proper job, something respectable. We can move past this. The offer sounded reasonable, safe, everything her father had ever taught her to value. Stability, respectability, the security of family support. No, Emily said. What did you say? No, I'm not coming home. I'm not apologizing. I'm not giving this up because it makes you uncomfortable. She walked to the front window, looked out at Chartres Street. You had 61 hours of my work at Ashley's wedding, and you let her claim it as someone else's. You gave me an eviction notice in front of 200 people because you wanted to remind me that I don't matter. So no, Dad, I'm not coming home. Emily Rose Carter, if you hang up this phone... She hung up. Her hands were shaking badly now, her heart racing. She'd just told her father no, actually said the word and meant it. Part of her expected him to somehow reach through the phone and punish her for the audacity. But nothing happened. The world didn't end. The walls didn't collapse. She just stood there in her almost finished atelier, breathing hard, feeling something that might have been pride, or might have been terror, or might have been both. Her phone rang again. Not her father this time. Adrian. Marcus said you've been working late, he said without preamble. Marcus talks too much. Marcus worries, so do I. A pause. Have you eaten today? Emily tried to remember. Coffee this morning, maybe some crackers around noon. I'll get something later. That's not an answer. It's the answer you're getting. She softened her tone. I'm fine, Adrian. The space looks good. Vincent says we're on schedule. Everything's going according to plan. Good. Another pause, longer this time. I'm having dinner at Marisol's tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. Join me. It wasn't quite a command, but it wasn't quite a request either. I don't think that's... Emily. His voice dropped lower. I'm asking you to have dinner with me. You can say no. But I'd like you to say yes. She should say no. Should maintain some kind of boundary between his help with the atelier and whatever this was turning into. But the truth was she wanted to see him, wanted to talk to someone who wasn't a contractor or a supplier, or Caroline with her endless questions about business licenses. Okay, she said, 8 o'clock. Marisol's was the kind of restaurant Emily had only read about. Exclusive, expensive, the type of place that required reservations weeks in advance and didn't have prices on the menu. She showed up at 7:55 in the only dress she owned that wasn't actively offensive, feeling underdressed and out of place. Adrian was already there, at a corner table that probably cost extra for the privacy. He stood when she approached, and Emily was struck again by how he moved, economical, deliberate, like every gesture had been considered and approved before execution. "You came," he said. "You asked. You could have said no." "I considered it." Emily sat down, accepted the wine menu from a server who materialized and vanished like smoke. "This place is excessive. I know." Adrian's mouth quirked slightly. "But the food's good and it's quiet. We can actually talk." Oh, they ordered, Emily letting Adrian recommend dishes because she was completely out of her depth with the menu, and then they were alone with the candles and the ambient noise of wealth. "How's the space coming?" Adrian asked. "Good, really good. Vincent's almost done with the major work. I should be able to start bringing in supplies next week, start testing recipes in the actual kitchen." Emily traced the edge of her water glass. "I've been thinking about opening day. Maybe something soft. Just a few items to start. Build slowly instead of trying to do everything at once. Smart. I talked to my father today." Adrian's expression didn't change, but something sharpened in his eyes. "And?" "He wanted me to come home. Said he'd forgive everything, find me a real job, pretend this never happened." She looked up at him. "I said no." "How did that feel?" "Terrifying." Emily laughed, but it came out shaky. "Also good. Which is weird. It should just feel good, right? But there's this part of me that's still waiting for punishment, like the universe is going to notice I disobeyed and something terrible will happen." "That's what they trained you to feel. Obedience through fear." Adrian leaned back slightly. "It gets easier. The guilt fades." "Does it?" "Eventually. Once you realize that the terrible consequences they threatened you with were always imaginary. They had power over you because you gave it to them. Once you stop, they're just people. Disappointing people who wasted something valuable." The food arrived, interrupting whatever Emily might have said to that. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, and Emily tried not to think too hard about how natural this felt. How easy it was to sit across from Adrian Wolfe, a man her family would describe as dangerous, and feel safer than she'd ever felt in her parents' house. "Can I ask you something?" Emily said finally. "Yes." "Why did you really help me? And don't say it's because I'm talented or because you hate waste. There's more to it than that." Adrian set down his fork, considered her with that unnerving focus. "You want the honest answer?" "Always." "Because watching you stand at that wedding, invisible in a dress designed to humiliate you, trying so hard to be small enough that no one would notice you were hurting, it reminded me of someone." He paused. "Me. A long time ago. Before I learned that survival means refusing to be small." Emily hadn't expected that. "What happened?" "I was 17. My father was a drunk who used his fists more than his words. My mother left when I was 8. I had a younger sister, Sophia, who was too smart and too kind for the neighborhood we grew up in." He spoke without emotion, just reciting facts. "I kept us alive by running errands for people who paid well and didn't ask questions. Small stuff at first, then bigger stuff. By the time I was 20, I was deep in it." "Your sister?" "Dead." The word was flat. Caught in crossfire from a deal that went wrong. She was 16. Emily felt something crack in her chest. "Adrian, I'm so sorry." "Don't be. It was a long time ago." He picked up his wine, didn't drink it. "After she died, I had a choice. Keep being small, keep surviving on scraps, or decide I was done letting other people decide what I deserved. So I stopped being small." "Is that why you do this? Help people?" "I help people who remind me of Sophia. People who are too good for the circumstances they're trapped in. People who just need someone to believe they're worth the investment." He looked at her directly. "You're worth it, Emily, even if your family convinced you otherwise." Emily didn't know what to say to that. The sincerity in his voice was almost overwhelming. "What happened to your father?" she asked instead. "He died. Liver failure, 10 years ago. I didn't go to the funeral." Adrian finally drank the wine. "Some people don't deserve forgiveness. Some people just deserve to be left behind." They finished dinner, and Adrian drove her home, not to his apartment, but to hers, the small place 2 blocks from the atelier. He walked her to the door like this was a normal date, like they were normal people. "Thank you," Emily said. "For dinner, for listening. Thank you for saying yes." He didn't try to kiss her, didn't push for more than she'd offered, just waited until she was inside and the door was locked before he left. Emily leaned against the door, her heart doing complicated things in her chest, and tried to convince herself that this was still just about the atelier, just about business and investment and mutual benefit. She was failing spectacularly. The next morning, Emily was at the atelier early, determined to focus on work instead of analyzing everything Adrian had said last night. She was testing the new oven, making sure the temperature held steady, that the convection worked properly, when she heard voices from the front room. She wiped her hands and went to investigate. Ashley stood in the front room, looking around with an expression somewhere between disgust and disbelief. She'd brought someone with her, Marcus Beaumont, her new husband, who looked uncomfortable and overdressed for the setting. "Emily," Ashley said, not bothering with pleasantries, "we need to talk." "How did you get in here?" "The door was unlocked." Ashley walked to the display case, ran a finger along the edge. "This is what you left us for? A bakery?" "An atelier, and yes," Ashley laughed, the sound sharp. "You're pathetic. You know that? Running away to play baker, living off money from a criminal, pretending this makes you independent." "I'm not pretending anything. You're pretending Adrian Wolfe gives a damn about you beyond whatever he's using you for." Ashley turned to face her fully. "Men like that don't help people out of kindness, Emily. They collect debts, and eventually he's going to come to collect. You don't know anything about him. I know what everyone knows. He's dangerous, he's ruthless, and he's going to ruin you." Ashley's voice took on an edge of something that might have been concern if it weren't wrapped in so much contempt. "Come home. Apologize. Mom and Dad will forgive you, and we can all pretend this never happened." "No. You're making a mistake." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." Emily crossed her arms. "Why are you really here, Ashley? To rescue me? Or to make sure I know my place?" Ashley's mask slipped slightly, revealing something uglier underneath. "You embarrassed us. At my wedding. In front of everyone. And now you're playing house with a gangster and people are talking. Do you have any idea what that does to the family reputation?" "I honestly don't care." "You should care. When this falls apart, and it will fall apart, you'll have nowhere to go, no family to catch you, no safety net, just your pride and whatever scraps he decides to leave you with." Marcus finally spoke up, his voice quieter than Ashley's. "Maybe we should go." "We're not done," Ashley snapped. "Yeah, we are." Emily walked to the door, held it open. "You need to leave." Emily. "Out. Now." Ashley stared at her like she didn't recognize this version of her sister. Maybe she didn't. Emily barely recognized herself, standing her ground, refusing to be small, claiming space that had never been offered. "Fine." Ashley grabbed her purse. "But when this implodes, don't come crying to us." "I won't." They left, Ashley's heels clicking aggressively on the sidewalk. Marcus glanced back once, something apologetic in his expression, then followed his wife. Emily closed the door, locked it this time, and stood there shaking. She'd done it again. Refused them. Held her ground. And it still felt terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Her phone buzzed. A text from Adrian. "Everything okay?" Emily stared at the message. How did he always know? Did he have cameras, people watching, or could he just sense when something was wrong? Ashley showed up. "It's handled." The response came immediately. "Need me to handle it differently?" Emily could imagine what that meant. Adrian could make problems disappear, could make sure her sister never bothered her again. The offer was there, implicit and absolute. "No, I've got this." "Good. Proud of you." 3 words, simple and devastating. Emily sat down on the floor of her almost finished atelier and let herself cry, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming strangeness of having someone be proud of her for something other than staying quiet. The weeks blurred together after that. The atelier took shape, beautiful and real, and hers. Emily worked 16-hour days, testing recipes, perfecting techniques, building an inventory of designs. She barely slept. She forgot to eat until Marcus showed up with food. She drove Caroline crazy with questions about business insurance and health permits and vendor contracts, but slowly, impossibly, it was working. 2 days before the planned soft opening, Emily was putting the finishing touches on her first display when Adrian appeared in the doorway. "Looks good," he said. "It's not perfect yet. Perfection's overrated." He walked to the display case, examined the 3 sample cakes she'd made. "These are beautiful. They're practice. They're art." He looked at her. "You ready?" Emily thought about everything that had led here. The wedding, the eviction notice, the phone call that changed everything. Thought about her family's certainty that she'd fail, that she'd come crawling back, that this was all just a dramatic mistake. "Yeah," she said. "I think I am." "Then let's make sure everyone knows it." He made a call, spoke quietly in French again, hung up. "I've invited some people for opening day. Food critics, bloggers, people who matter in this city. They'll come because I asked, but they'll stay because your work is good." "Adrian, that's strategic. You need visibility. I can provide that." He paused. "Unless you'd rather do this alone." Emily should probably say yes, should probably maintain some independence, prove she could succeed without his connections smoothing the way. But she was also practical enough to know that pride didn't pay rent. "Thank you," she said instead. Opening day arrived with rain, heavy summer rain that turned the streets into rivers and made Emily certain no one would come. She was wrong. By noon, there was a line outside her door. People came for the curiosity, maybe, drawn by Adrian's name and the rumors swirling around Emily Carter and her dramatic break from New Orleans society. But they stayed for the cakes. Emily worked the counter herself, talking to customers, explaining the flavors, watching people's faces when they tasted her work. Each compliment felt surreal. Each sale felt like proof that she'd made the right choice. Adrian came by late afternoon, stayed in the background, watching. He didn't interfere, didn't draw attention to himself. Just stood there like a shadow, making sure she knew she wasn't alone. The day ended with Emily exhausted, exhilarated, and completely sold out. She locked the door, turned to find Adrian still there. "You did it," he said. "We did it," Emily corrected. "I couldn't have, without your help." He crossed the space between them, close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him. "Emily, stop diminishing what you built. I gave you money and connections. You made this." He gestured at the empty display case, the satisfied customers' photos already appearing on social media, the future spreading out in front of her. "You." Emily looked up at him, at this dangerous man who'd invested in her when no one else would, and felt something shift irrevocably in her chest. "Adrian," she started, but before she could finish, the front window shattered. Glass exploded inward, a brick tumbling across the floor before crashing into the display case. Emily felt Adrian's hands on her shoulders, pulling her down behind the counter as more glass rained down. The sound was deafening in the small space, shattering, violent, final. Then silence. Adrian was on his phone before Emily could process what had happened, speaking rapidly in French. She heard car doors slamming outside, footsteps running away, then Marcus's voice cutting through the chaos. "Clear. They're gone." Emily stood on shaking legs, staring at the destruction. Her front window was completely destroyed, glass everywhere, glittering under the lights like malicious snow. The brick sat in the middle of the floor, wrapped in paper. Adrian picked it up, unfolded the note. "What does it say?" Emily's voice sounded strange to her own ears. He crumpled the paper without answering, his jaw tight. "Marcus, get someone to board this up, now." "Adrian, what did it say?" He looked at her, and she saw something dangerous flash across his face. "It doesn't matter." "It does to me." He handed her the note. The message was short, printed in block letters. "Criminal money. Carter's shame. Go home." Emily felt something cold settle in her stomach. "My family did this." "You don't know that." "Who else?" "Ashley was here yesterday, threatening me. Dad's been calling, leaving messages about how I'm destroying the family reputation." She looked at the shattered window, at her beautiful space violated. "This is them telling me what happens when I don't listen." Adrian's expression hardened. "I'll handle it." "No." "Emily." "No." She said it firmly, surprising herself. "This is my problem, my family. I'll handle it. They just threw a brick through your window. And I'm going to deal with it. Tomorrow. Tonight I'm going to help clean this up, board the window, and figure out how much it's going to cost to replace. Emily started picking up larger pieces of glass, her hands steadier than she felt. You said I needed to stop being small. This is me not being small. Marcus appeared with plywood and tools, along with two other men Emily recognized from Adrian's building. They worked efficiently, covering the broken window, sweeping up glass, checking for additional damage. The whole time, Adrian watched Emily with an expression she couldn't quite read. By midnight, the worst was cleaned up. The atelier looked wounded, the boarded window an ugly reminder that not everyone wanted her to succeed, but salvageable. Emily stood in the middle of the floor, exhausted and angry and refusing to cry. Come on, Adrian said quietly. I'm taking you home. I need to Emily, there's nothing else to do tonight. Come home. She let him drive her to her apartment, let him walk her upstairs, let him check the locks and windows like he expected someone to break in here too. When he turned to leave, Emily caught his arm. Stay, she said. Please. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. That's not a good idea. I don't want to be alone tonight. Emily. His voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. You're upset. You've had a terrible day. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. I'm asking you to stay because I don't want to spend tonight replaying what happened and convincing myself I should give up. Whoosh, she didn't let go of his arm. I'm not asking for anything except company. He stayed. They sat on Emily's couch, the second-hand thing she'd bought for $200 that was more springs than cushions, and didn't talk. Adrian made coffee even though it was too late for coffee. Emily wrapped herself in a blanket and tried not to think about the brick, the note, the message that she should be ashamed of herself. I'm not going home, she said finally. I know. They want me to fail. They need me to fail. Because if I don't, it means everything they said about me was wrong. Emily pulled the blanket tighter. My whole life, I believed them. Believed I was too quiet, too average, too forgettable to matter. And I worked so hard to prove them wrong, but I always did it on their terms, trying to earn approval they were never going to give. And now? Now I don't care if they approve. I care about making something good, something mine. She looked at him. Does that make me selfish? It makes you sane. Adrian set down his coffee. Your family wants you to believe that wanting anything for yourself is selfish, that taking up space is arrogant. That's how they keep control, by convincing you that you don't deserve more than what they're willing to give. Is that what your father did? To you? My father told me I was worthless, that I'd never amount to anything, that the best I could hope for was staying out of his way and maybe not getting hit too hard when he was drunk. Adrian's voice was flat, reciting facts. I believed him until Sophia died. Then I realized that the person who told me I was worthless was just a pathetic drunk who'd wasted his own life and wanted company in the gutter. Emily moved closer, tentative. I'm sorry you went through that. Don't be. It made me who I am. He looked at her. Same way this is making you who you are. The question is whether you're going to let them define that person or if you're going to define it yourself. I want to define it myself. Then do it. Tomorrow you call a glass company, get that window fixed, and keep going. You don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you quit. What if they do something worse? Then I handle it. Adrian's expression turned cold. I've been patient because you asked me to be, but there are limits to my patience, especially when it comes to people hurting someone I care about. The confession landed between them, quiet and undeniable. Adrian, don't. He stood up, put distance between them. It's late. You need to sleep. I'll take the couch. You don't have to. Yes, I do. His voice was firm. Go to bed, Emily. She wanted to argue, wanted to push back against the walls he was putting up, but she was exhausted and he was right. She needed sleep. She went to her bedroom, closed the door, and lay awake listening to the sounds of Adrian settling on her terrible couch. It took her a long time to fall asleep, and when she did, she dreamed of shattered glass and notes written in her father's handwriting. Morning came too early. Emily woke to the smell of coffee and found Adrian already gone. A note on the kitchen counter in his precise handwriting. Glass company coming at 9. Marcus will be there. Call me if you need anything. The glass company arrived exactly at 9. The owner took one look at the damage, quoted a price that made Emily wince, then added that Adrian had already paid for it. Of course he had. By noon, a new window was installed, thicker than the original, reinforced. Hurricane glass, the installer explained. Won't break easy. Someone throws another brick, it'll bounce right off. Emily stood on the sidewalk, staring at her repaired window, and felt something settle in her chest. She wasn't giving up. She wasn't going home. She was going to call her father and make sure he understood that. She made it halfway through dialing before she lost her nerve. Instead, she called Caroline. I need advice, Emily said when Caroline answered. Professional or personal? Both, probably. Someone vandalized the atelier last night, threw a brick through the window with a note telling me to go home. Caroline was quiet for a moment. Do you think it was your family? I don't know, maybe, or maybe just someone who agrees with them. Emily walked back inside, surveyed her space. Either way, I need to decide how to respond. Do I confront them, ignore it, get a lawyer? What does Adrian say? He says he'll handle it, but I don't want him to handle it. This is my fight. Then fight it your way. Caroline's voice was practical. You want my advice? Don't engage with your family directly. Don't give them the confrontation they're looking for. Just succeed. Loudly, publicly, undeniably. Make it impossible for anyone to claim you failed. That's it? Just succeed? Sometimes the best revenge is refusing to play their game. They want you scared, defensive, making mistakes. Don't give them that. Caroline paused. Also, get security cameras. Document everything. If they escalate, you'll need evidence. Emily thanked her and hung up, feeling marginally more in control. Caroline was right. The best response was to keep going, to make the atelier so successful that her family's disapproval became irrelevant. She spent the afternoon preparing for the next day's opening, restocking supplies, testing new recipes, posting on the social media accounts she'd reluctantly created at Caroline's insistence. The response to opening day had been overwhelming. People were already asking about custom orders, special events, wholesale opportunities. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages, emails, requests. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Around 5, Ashley walked in. Emily looked up from the cake she was assembling, her stomach immediately tightening. We're closed. I'm not here to buy anything. Ashley looked around, taking in the repaired window, the pristine space. I heard about last night. Did you? Emily, I didn't. Ashley stopped, started again. I didn't throw the brick. Neither did Mom or Dad. But you know who did. Ashley's silence was answer enough. Get out, Emily said quietly. Just listen for a second. No, you don't get to come in here and pretend you care. You threatened me 2 days ago. You told me this would fall apart, that I'd have nowhere to go. Well, someone took that as permission to try making it fall apart faster. I didn't mean, yes, you did. Emily set down her piping bag, faced her sister fully. You've spent your whole life making sure I knew my place, making sure I understood that you were the beautiful one, the successful one, the daughter worth celebrating. And the second I tried to build something for myself, you couldn't handle it. Ashley's composure cracked slightly. You humiliated me, at my wedding, in front of everyone. I claim my work. That's not humiliation. That's honesty. You brought Adrian Wolfe to my wedding like some kind of weapon. You turned my perfect day into a scandal. Ashley's voice rose. Do you have any idea what people have been saying? About our family, about me? About what kind of people we must be if my own sister would rather be with a criminal than... Stop calling him that. It's what he is. He's someone who saw me struggling and helped, unlike any of you. Emily's voice stayed level, cold. Adrian didn't ask me to be smaller. He didn't tell me my dreams were unrealistic. He didn't hand me an eviction notice at a family celebration. He just gave me a chance. And what does he want in return? Ashley demanded. Men like that don't help people out of kindness, Emily. There's always a price. Maybe, but at least he's honest about who he is. He doesn't pretend to care while systematically tearing me down. Emily moved toward the door, held it open. Leave. And tell Mom and Dad that I'm not coming home. Not after last night, not ever. This is my home now. Ashley's eyes were shining with something that might have been tears or might have been rage. You're making a mistake. Then it's mine to make. Ashley left without another word, her heels clicking away down the street. Emily locked the door behind her, leaned against it, and tried to calm her racing heart. Her phone buzzed. Adrian. Everything okay? Emily stared at the message. How did he always know? Ashley was here. I handled it. Want me to come by? She did. She wanted him there, wanted his steady presence, wanted to stop feeling like she was fighting this battle alone. But she also knew that relying on Adrian too much was dangerous, that at some point she needed to prove she could stand on her own. I'm okay. Thank you for asking. His response came quickly. Dinner tomorrow night? My place. I'll cook. Emily smiled despite everything. You cook? Occasionally. When I'm trying to impress someone. Is it working? You'll have to tell me tomorrow. The next few days passed in a blur of work. The atelier was busier than Emily had dared hope, customers coming in for the novelty, staying for the quality. She hired her first employee, a culinary school dropout named Mia, who had more piercings than Emily had ever seen on one person, but could pipe buttercream roses that made grown women cry. Your sister came by again, Mia mentioned casually one afternoon, unpacking a supply delivery. Emily looked up from the wedding cake she was assembling. When? Like an hour ago. I told her you were busy. She left this. Mia handed over an envelope. Inside was a check from Robert Carter for $50,000 and a note in her father's handwriting. Come home. We can forget this happened. Emily stared at the check, at the number that represented everything she'd been fighting for. Financial security, breathing room, the ability to grow the business without constantly worrying about money. All she had to do was go home. She tore the check in half, then quarters, then kept tearing until it was confetti. Mia watched with wide eyes. That was a lot of money, Mia said. It was a bribe. Emily swept the pieces into the trash. And I'm not for sale. That evening, Emily showed up at Adrian's apartment with wine and stories about her father's latest manipulation attempt. Adrian actually cooked, moving around his kitchen with the same precise efficiency he brought to everything, while Emily sat at the counter and tried not to think too hard about how domestic this felt. He sent you $50,000? Adrian set down his knife, turned to face her fully. Yep, with a note saying we could forget everything if I just came home. What did you do? Destroyed it, dramatically. Mia was impressed. Emily sipped her wine. I'm running out of ways to tell them no. How many times do I have to refuse before they believe I mean it? With people like that? There's no magic number. They'll keep trying until you stop being useful to manipulate, or until you make the cost of manipulation too high. Adrian returned to cooking, his movements controlled. Your father thinks money solves everything. Show him it doesn't. How? By succeeding without it. By building something so undeniably yours that he can't claim credit, can't buy his way in, can't control it. He plated the food, something with salmon and vegetables that looked restaurant quality. Make yourself untouchable. They ate at his dining table, the one that probably cost more than Emily's car, overlooking the river. The food was perfect. The wine was perfect. The conversation was easy in a way that still surprised her. Adrian asked about the atelier, about her plans, about the custom orders that were starting to come in. He didn't ask about them, about whatever this was between them, about whether Emily felt the same pull he did, about where this was going. Emily appreciated that and resented it in equal measure. Can I ask you something? She said, pushing her empty plate aside. Always. Why don't you ever... She stopped, tried to find the right words. At the wedding, you showed up for me. You've helped me build the atelier. You check on me constantly. You're clearly invested in this, but you keep your distance. Why? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Because you deserve someone who can give you a normal life. Someone safe. I'm not asking for normal. I'm asking why you won't... Emily. He said her name like a warning. I'm not a good man. I do things that would horrify you. I've hurt people. I will hurt people again, probably soon, because that's what my world requires. You're building something good, something clean. I don't want to contaminate that. You're not... I am. He stood, walked to the windows. Your family's right about me. I'm dangerous. The only thing they're wrong about is thinking that makes me less than them. I'm dangerous in ways they can't imagine, but I'm honest about it. They're dangerous in quieter ways, and they lie about who they are while they're destroying you. Emily joined him at the window, stood close enough to feel the tension radiating off him. I'm not asking you to be someone else. I'm asking you to stop pushing me away. You don't understand what you're asking. Then explain it to me. Adrian turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. If I stop pushing you away, if I let this become what we both know it could be, then you become a target. Everyone I've ever cared about becomes a target. That's what happens when you exist in my world. People use the ones you love against you. I'm already a target. My own family's trying to destroy what I built. That's different. That's family politics, manipulation, social pressure. What I'm talking about is real danger, the kind that ends with people getting hurt. He reached out, almost touched her face, then pulled back. I won't put you in that position. What if I'm willing to take that risk? You don't know enough to make that choice. Emily felt frustration rising. Stop deciding what I can handle. You've been treating me like I'm fragile, like I need to be protected from reality. But I'm not fragile, Adrian. I'm standing here, running a business in a city where my family has influence, refusing to back down even after someone threw a brick through my window. I'm not asking for protection. I'm asking for honesty. You want honesty? His voice dropped, dangerous. Fine. 3 weeks ago, a man tried to move product through my territory without permission. I had him beaten badly enough that he'll never walk properly again. Last month, a politician thought he could renege on an agreement we'd made. I destroyed his campaign with information I'd been holding on to for exactly that purpose. 6 months ago, someone threatened one of my people, and I made sure everyone in the city knew what happens when you cross me. He stepped closer, and Emily forced herself not to back away. That's who I am, Adrian continued. I'm not a good person who does bad things sometimes. I'm someone who operates in darkness because that's where I'm most effective. You want honesty? I care about you more than is smart, more than is safe, more than I've cared about anyone in years. But I also know that the best thing I can do for you is keep my distance. And if I don't want you to keep your distance, then you're not thinking clearly. Or maybe you're not giving me enough credit. Emily held her ground even though her heart was hammering. I know who you are. I've known since the night you showed up at Ashley's wedding. I chose to call you anyway. I chose to take your help. I chose to have dinner with you. I'm choosing this, Adrian. Stop trying to make that choice for me. They stood there, inches apart, the air between them charged with everything they weren't saying. Then Adrian's phone rang. He ignored it. It rang again. Answer it, Emily said quietly. He pulled out the phone, looked at the screen, and his expression hardened. I have to take this. He walked to the other room, and Emily heard him speaking in rapid French, his tone clipped and commanding. When he came back, his face was carefully neutral. I need to handle something, he said. Marcus will drive you home. What's wrong? Nothing you need to worry about. He was already moving toward the door. I'll call you tomorrow. Adrian? Tomorrow, Emily, I promise. He was gone before she could argue, and Emily was left standing in his apartment, feeling like she'd been on the verge of something important before reality intervened. Marcus appeared to drive her home, silent as always. Emily spent the drive staring out the window, trying not to spiral into anxiety about what kind of problem required Adrian's immediate attention at 10 o'clock at night. The next morning, she had her answer. Her father was waiting outside the atelier when she arrived to open up. Robert Carter looked older than she remembered, tired in a way that seemed deeper than simple exhaustion. He stood with his hands in his pockets, expensive suit slightly rumpled, and for the first time in Emily's memory, he looked uncertain. Dad, she said carefully, what are you doing here? I came to apologize. Emily almost dropped her keys. You what? I came to apologize, Robert repeated, for the eviction notice, for undermining you at the wedding, for... He stopped, seemed to gather himself. For a lot of things, actually. Is this some kind of trick? No trick. Just, can we talk? Inside? Every instinct Emily had developed over 26 years screamed that this was a trap. But curiosity won. She unlocked the door, let him follow her inside. Robert looked around the atelier, really looked, taking in the display case, the carefully designed space, the evidence of Emily's work. It's beautiful, he said quietly. Really beautiful. Thank you. Your mother told me what you did with the check, tore it up. I did. $50,000.
I don't want your money, Dad. I never wanted your money. I wanted you to see me.
Robert was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I had a visit last night. From Adrian Wolfe. Emily's stomach dropped. What did he do? Nothing violent, if that's what you're worried about. He just talked to me. About you. About what I've done to you over the years. About what kind of father lets his daughter believe she's worthless. Robert's voice was rough. He told me things I said to you, things I did, moments I'd forgotten, and he made it very clear what would happen if I ever treated you that way again. He threatened you. He promised me. Robert looked at her directly. He said if I ever made you feel small again, if I ever tried to manipulate you, if I ever did anything to undermine what you're building here, he would systematically destroy everything I've spent my life creating, my business, my reputation, my standing in this city. He was very specific about how he'd do it. Emily didn't know what to feel. Anger that Adrian had interfered despite her telling him not to. Relief that maybe, finally, her father understood the cost of his cruelty. Fear about what Adrian had revealed about himself in the process. I should be angry, Robert continued, a criminal threatening me in my own home, but the thing is, Emily, he was right. About all of it. I've been a terrible father to you. I measured you against Ashley and found you wanting, and I never stopped to consider that maybe I was measuring wrong. Why are you telling me this? Because he made me see something I should have seen on my own. You're talented, you're hardworking, you're brave enough to walk away from everything you knew to build something true. And instead of supporting that, I tried to crush it because it made me uncomfortable. Tears were threatening, but Emily forced them back. You gave me an eviction notice at Ashley's wedding. I know. I'm sorry. You let Ashley claim my work as someone else's. I know. I'm sorry. You've spent my entire life making sure I knew I wasn't good enough. Robert's composure cracked. I know, and I'm so sorry. Emily wanted to accept the apology, wanted to believe that this was real, that her father had finally seen her, that everything could be different now. But she thought about Adrian's warning, about how they would be nice for a while, then slowly everything would go back to how it was. I appreciate you coming here, Emily said carefully. And I hear your apology. But I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did, it wasn't one mistake. It was 26 years of mistakes, 26 years of making me feel invisible. You don't fix that with one apology. I understand. And I don't want your money. I don't want your help. I don't want anything from you except to be left alone to build this. Robert nodded slowly. I can do that. Good. Emily walked to the door, held it open. I need to get ready to open. Her father stood, moved toward the exit, then paused. For what it's worth, Emily, I'm proud of you. I should have said that a long time ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm proud of you. He left, and Emily locked the door behind him, then slid down to sit on the floor. Her father had apologized. Her father was proud of her. And the only reason that had happened was because Adrian had threatened him into it. She didn't know whether to be grateful or furious. When she finally called Adrian that afternoon, he answered on the first ring. My father was here this morning, she said without preamble. I know. You threatened him. I promised him consequences if he continued hurting you. There's a difference. Adrian, I told you I wanted to handle my family myself. And you are. I just made sure they understood the cost of not respecting that. His voice was calm, reasonable. Did he apologize? Yes. Did he mean it? Emily thought about her father's face, the genuine regret in his voice. I think so, but only because you scared him into it. Does it matter why he apologized if the result is that he leaves you alone? Yes! It matters because I wanted him to apologize because he realized he was wrong, not because he was afraid of you. Emily, Adrian's voice gentled, your father was never going to realize he was wrong. Men like that don't have those epiphanies. They just recalibrate their cost-benefit analysis when the costs get too high. I made the costs higher than his pride. That's all. He was right. She knew he was right, but it still felt like he'd taken something from her, the chance to fight her own battle, to earn her father's respect on her own terms. I need some space, she said quietly. Silence on the other end. Then, Okay, this isn't me pushing you away. I just need to think. I understand. He paused. Emily, I'm sorry if I overstepped. I just couldn't watch them hurt you anymore. I know, I'll call you soon. She hung up and sat in her beautiful atelier, surrounded by evidence of her success, and tried to figure out how she felt about loving a man who solved problems with threats and violence. Because she did love him. That was the terrifying part. She loved Adrian Wolfe, and she had no idea if that made her brave or foolish or both. Emily didn't call Adrian for 3 days. She told herself she needed the space to think, to process, to figure out how she felt about everything that had happened. But the truth was simpler and more complicated. She was afraid. Afraid of how much she wanted him. Afraid that loving someone like Adrian meant accepting a version of herself she didn't fully recognize. Afraid that if she called him, she'd have to make a decision she wasn't ready to make. The atelier kept her busy enough that she could almost pretend the silence didn't bother her. Orders were coming in faster than she could handle alone, even with Mia's help. A food blogger had featured one of her cakes, and suddenly everyone in New Orleans wanted something from Emily Carter Atelier. It was everything she'd hoped for and more overwhelming than she'd anticipated. On the 4th day, Mia cornered her in the kitchen. Okay, what's going on? Mia asked, arms crossed. You've been weird all week. I'm not weird, I'm focused. You're baking angry. There's a difference. Mia gestured at the counter where Emily had been working on a wedding cake with more force than necessary. You've remade that tier 3 times. It was perfect the first time. Emily set down her spatula, suddenly exhausted. I'm just trying to get it right. No, you're avoiding something, or someone. Mia's expression softened. Is this about the guy? The one who helped you set this place up? How did you... Please. I've seen him around. Tall, dark. Looks like he could kill someone with his pinky finger. Also, Marcus mentioned him. Marcus talks to you? Marcus talks to everyone. He's actually pretty chatty once you get past the whole intimidating bodyguard thing. Mia hopped up onto the counter, ignoring Emily's half-hearted protest. So what happened? He do something stupid? Emily considered lying, then decided she was too tired. He threatened my father, made him apologize to me. And that's bad because? Because I wanted to handle my family myself. I wanted them to respect me because I earned it, not because they were scared of Adrian. Mia was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you something? My parents kicked me out when I was 17, said I was too wild, too difficult, too much of a disappointment. I spent 2 years trying to prove I was worth their respect, working 3 jobs, staying out of trouble, doing everything right. She picked at her nail polish. Know what happened? Nothing. They still think I'm a screw-up, because people like that don't change their minds. They just find new reasons to justify what they already believe. That's different. Is it? Your dad apologized because Adrian scared him, but at least he apologized. At least he's leaving you alone now. Does it really matter why? Emily wanted to argue, but she couldn't find the words. Maybe Mia was right. Maybe she was holding on to some idealized version of how this should have gone, when the reality was that her father had apologized and her family was finally backing off. The method didn't erase the result. I think I need to talk to him, Emily admitted. Yeah, probably. Mia jumped down from the counter. And for what it's worth, a guy who threatens your terrible father so you can build your dream bakery is not the worst thing that could happen to you. Atelier, Emily corrected automatically. Whatever, same difference. That night, Emily stood outside Adrian's building for 10 minutes before she got the courage to go inside. The security guard recognized her, nodded her through without question. She took the elevator up to the top floor, her heart racing the entire way. Adrian opened the door before she could knock. Emily? He looked surprised, which was rare for him. Is everything okay? Can I come in? He stepped aside immediately. The apartment looked the same as always, austere, organized, revealing nothing about the person who lived there. Adrian himself looked tired, she noticed. Like maybe he hadn't been sleeping well either. I'm sorry, Emily said before she lost her nerve. For how I reacted. For needing space. For making you feel like you did something wrong when you were just trying to help. You don't need to apologize. Yes, I do. You've been nothing but honest with me about who you are, and I freaked out the second that reality intersected with my life in a way I couldn't control. She moved further into the apartment trying to organize her thoughts.
I wanted to handle my family myself because I wanted to prove I was strong enough. But asking for help doesn't make me weak.
It just makes me smart enough to know when I need backup. Adrian watched her with that unnerving intensity. What changed your mind? Mia pointed out that I was more invested in how my father apologized than the fact that he did. And she was right. I was so focused on earning his respect that I forgot the whole point was getting him to leave me alone, which he's doing now. Because of you. Emily, let me finish. She took a breath. I love you. I think I've loved you since that night at the wedding when you walked in like you owned the place and didn't care what anyone thought. And I'm terrified because I don't know how to be with someone who exists in the world you exist in, but I'm more terrified of not trying. Adrian was very still. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. I love you. I love how you see me. Not the invisible daughter my family wanted me to be, but the person I actually am. I love that you gave me space to build something without trying to control it. I love that you threatened my father, even though you knew it would make me angry, because you couldn't stand watching him hurt me anymore. Emily, Adrian's voice was rough. I'm not going to change. I'm not going to become someone safe or normal or appropriate. The things I do, the world I operate in, that's not going away. I'm not asking you to change. I'm asking you to stop pushing me away because you think you're protecting me. She moved closer. I'm choosing this, Adrian. I'm choosing you. Stop trying to make that decision for me. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands coming up to frame her face. If we do this, you need to understand the risks. People will use you against me. Your family will be horrified. Society will judge you. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having is easy. You taught me that. Adrian kissed her then, and it felt like falling and flying at the same time. Emily wrapped her arms around him and let herself fall, trusting that he'd catch her. They spent the night talking, really talking, about everything they'd been avoiding. Adrian told her about his business, the gray areas he operated in, the people he worked with who lived outside the law. He didn't soften it or make excuses, just laid it out clearly so she could make an informed choice. Emily told him about her fears, that she wasn't strong enough for this, that she'd fail at the atelier, that loving him meant becoming someone her family would use as ammunition, that maybe Ashley was right and she was making a terrible mistake. You're the strongest person I know, Adrian said, his arms around her in the dark. You walked away from everything familiar to build something true. That takes more courage than anything I've ever done. You built an empire from nothing. I built it on fear and violence and calculated risk. You're building something on beauty and skill and genuine care. There's no comparison. Emily shifted to look at him. What happens now? Now you keep building your atelier. I keep doing what I do. We figure out how to make this work. That simple? That complicated? His smile was slight, but worth it. The next morning, Emily woke up in Adrian's bed to the smell of coffee and the sound of him on the phone speaking rapid French. She lay there for a moment, letting the reality of what she'd decided sink in. She'd committed to this, to him, to whatever this relationship would become, to accepting that love didn't always come in safe packages. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like relief. Over the following weeks, Emily settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable for the first time in her life. The atelier was thriving. She'd had to hire 2 more people just to keep up with orders, and Caroline was helping her navigate expansion possibilities. Her custom cakes were getting featured in magazines, on food blogs, in the kind of publications she'd only dreamed about. And Adrian was there, a constant presence that never felt suffocating. He'd show up at closing time with dinner, or text her in the middle of the day to remind her to eat, or send Marcus to help when a delivery arrived that was too heavy for Emily and Mia to handle alone. He never tried to insert himself into the business, never offered unsolicited advice, or made her feel like she owed him for his help. He just existed in her life as someone who cared, who paid attention, who remembered the small things. Her family left her alone. Robert kept his distance, though he'd sent flowers on the atelier's 3-month anniversary with a card that just said, "Proud of you." Margaret called once, a stilted conversation where she asked about the business and didn't mention the wedding. Ashley didn't reach out at all, which was probably for the best. Emily didn't miss them. That was the surprising part. She'd spent so long believing she needed their approval their validation, their love. But now that she had built something without them, had created a life that felt authentically hers, their absence didn't hurt the way she'd expected it to. It just felt like freedom. 4 months after opening, Emily was working late on a particularly complicated wedding cake when Adrian appeared in the doorway. She looked up, surprised. He usually called before stopping by. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Can you take a break?" Something in his tone made her set down her tools immediately. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I just need to show you something." He drove her across the city in silence, which made Emily increasingly nervous. They ended up in a neighborhood she didn't recognize, industrial buildings, warehouses, the kind of area that probably looked sketchy after dark. Adrian parked in front of a large warehouse with a "For Sale" sign. "What are we doing here?" Emily asked. "Just trust me." He got out, and she followed. He unlocked the warehouse. Apparently he already had keys, and led her inside. The space was enormous, mostly empty, with high ceilings and good natural light from skylights. It smelled like dust and possibility. "I don't understand," Emily said. "You need more space. The atelier is too small for the volume you're doing now, and it's only going to get busier." Adrian walked to the center of the warehouse, his footsteps echoing. "This could be your production facility, big enough for multiple ovens, prep stations, storage. You could keep the Chartres Street location as the storefront and do all your major work here." Emily turned slowly, taking in the space. He was right. She'd been struggling with space constraints for weeks, turning down orders because she didn't have capacity. This warehouse could change everything. "Adrian, I can't afford—" "I'm not asking you to buy it. I already did." He pulled out papers from his jacket. "It's yours, completely. No strings, no rent, no expectations, just yours to use however you want." Emily stared at the deed he was holding out. "You bought me a warehouse. I bought you space to grow." This is insane. You can't just buy me a warehouse." "Why not?" "Because it's too much, because I can't accept something like this without—" She stopped, trying to organize her thoughts. "Without owing you something I'm not sure I can pay back." Adrian crossed the space to stand in front of her. "You don't owe me anything, Emily. Not for this, not for the atelier, not for any of it. I told you from the beginning, I'm investing in something good. This is that investment." "But why? Why do you care this much?" "Because watching you succeed makes me believe that good things can exist in this world without being corrupted or destroyed. Because you make beautiful things and put your name on them and refuse to compromise for people who don't deserve your compromise." He touched her face gently. "Because I love you, and this is how I know how to show it." Emily felt tears threatening. "This is crazy." "Probably. I don't know how to run a production facility." "You'll figure it out. You always do." She looked around the warehouse again, at the space and light and potential. Thought about what she could build here, the orders she could take, the people she could hire. The atelier had been about proving she could succeed. This could be about building something that lasted. "Okay," she said. Adrian smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Yeah? Yeah. But I'm paying utilities and maintenance, and if this thing makes money, you're getting a return on investment. Deal!" They stood in the empty warehouse, and Emily felt the future spreading out in front of her, complicated and uncertain and full of possibility. 6 months later, Emily Carter Atelier had expanded into Emily Carter Productions. The warehouse was operational, employing 12 people full-time and handling custom orders from across the state. The original Chartres Street location was still the flagship, but now it focused exclusively on walk-in business and small orders while the big projects happened at the warehouse. Emily had been featured in Southern Living magazine. A celebrity chef had commissioned a cake for his daughter's birthday. She'd been invited to compete on a baking competition show, which she'd declined because the thought of being on television made her want to hide in a walk-in freezer. She was successful, undeniably, publicly successful, and her name was on everything. She was also exhausted. Running 2 locations was brutal, even with good staff. She worked too much, slept too little, and survived on coffee and the occasional reminder from Adrian to actually eat meals. But she was happy. That was the strange part. Despite the stress and the long hours and the constant pressure, Emily was genuinely happy in a way she'd never been before. Her father had reached out twice more, once to ask if she'd cater a business event. She'd declined. Once to invite her to a family dinner. She'd also declined. Margaret called monthly with updates about Ashley's pregnancy, clearly hoping Emily would soften and come around. She hadn't softened, but she'd stopped feeling angry. Her family had become strangers she used to know, people she could be civil to without letting them back into her life. Ashley sent a letter in July. Not a text, not an email. An actual handwritten letter that arrived at the atelier in expensive stationery. Emily almost threw it away without reading it. But curiosity won. The letter was short, Ashley's perfect handwriting filling a single page. Emily, I'm writing this because my therapist says I need to take accountability. She says I've spent my whole life competing with you instead of supporting you, and that the competition was unfair because I rigged it from the start. She's right. I've been jealous of you since we were kids. Not because you had anything I wanted, you were quiet and awkward and never fit in, but because you didn't seem to care. You never tried to be like me, never seemed bothered by the fact that Mom and Dad liked me better. It made me crazy that you could be happy being yourself when I worked so hard to be perfect. What I did at my wedding was cruel, claiming your cake, making you wear that dress, letting Dad humiliate you. All of it was designed to remind you that I was better. But the truth is, you are better. You always have been. You just needed to realize it. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that I see you now. I see what you've built, and it's extraordinary. Congratulations on your success. You earned every bit of it. Ashley. Emily read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in her desk drawer. She didn't know if she believed Ashley's apology, didn't know if she ever would. But it was something. Acknowledgement, at least, that the cruelty had been real and intentional. Maybe someday she'd respond, or maybe she wouldn't. Either way, she had her answer. Her sister saw her now, whether or not that changed anything. In September, Adrian took her to dinner at Marisol's again. Same corner table, same quiet privacy, same feeling of being in a bubble separate from the rest of the world. They'd been together for 9 months, though Emily had stopped trying to define exactly what together meant. They didn't live together. Emily valued her independence too much, and Adrian had never suggested otherwise. But they spent most nights together, either at his place or hers. They existed in each other's lives naturally, without formal labels or declarations. It worked. That was enough. I have something for you, Adrian said after they'd ordered. If it's another property, I'm going to throw this wine at you. He smiled. Not a property, just this. He pulled out a small box, and Emily's heart stopped. Adrian, let me finish. He opened the box, revealing a ring, simple, elegant, a single diamond that caught the light. I'm not good at normal. I don't know how to do relationships the right way, but I know that I want you in my life permanently. Not as someone I'm helping or investing in, but as a partner, someone who sees all of me and chooses to stay anyway. Emily felt tears starting. Are you asking me to marry you? I'm asking you to build a life with me. Marriage, partnership, whatever you want to call it. I just want it to be official that you're mine and I'm yours. This is insane. We've only been together 9 months. I've known for longer than that. Adrian's expression was serious. I knew the night of your sister's wedding, when you walked out barefoot because you were done being small. I knew then that if you'd let me, I'd spend the rest of my life making sure you never had to be small again. Emily looked at the ring, at Adrian's face, at the life they'd built together, in stolen moments and shared silences. Thought about the girl she'd been 9 months ago, invisible and overlooked, convinced she didn't deserve more than scraps of affection. That girl wouldn't recognize who she'd become, wouldn't believe that she could run a successful business, stand up to her family, love someone dangerous, and be loved back just as fiercely. Yes, Emily said. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll be your partner. Yes to all of it. She was crying now, not bothering to hide it. But you have to understand, I'm not giving up the atelier. I'm not becoming someone who exists in your shadow. I would never ask you to. Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. I want you exactly as you are. Stubborn, talented, too independent for your own good sometimes. All of it. They stayed at dinner for hours, talking about logistics and possibilities. Whether to have a wedding or just go to the courthouse. Whether to tell her family or keep it private. Whether to combine their lives or maintain separate spaces. They didn't decide everything that night, but they decided the important thing. They were doing this together, whatever this became. Emily called her father the next day, not because she wanted his blessing, but because he deserved to know. "Dad, I'm getting married." Silence on the other end, then, "To Adrian Wolfe." "Yes." More silence. Emily waited, prepared for objections or warnings or disappointment. "Are you happy?" Robert asked finally. The question surprised her. "Yes, very." "Then I'm happy for you." He paused. "I know I don't have the right to give you my blessing, but for what it's worth, you have it. And Emily, I really am proud of you. I should have said it more, should have shown it better, but I'm proud of the person you've become." Emily felt something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of acceptance. Her father had hurt her, had spent years making her feel inadequate, but he was also trying, in his limited way, to do better. Maybe that was enough. Maybe it wasn't. Either way, it didn't define her anymore. "Thank you," she said. "That means something." They talked for a few more minutes, awkward and stilted, but not hostile. When Emily hung up, she felt lighter somehow. Like she'd been carrying weight she hadn't realized was there. The wedding was small, intimate, nothing like the elaborate spectacle Ashley had orchestrated. Just Emily and Adrian at the courthouse on a Thursday afternoon, with Marcus and Caroline as witnesses. Emily wore a simple cream dress she'd bought the day before. Adrian wore the same suit he'd worn to Ashley's wedding, the one that had started everything. The ceremony took 10 minutes. The judge pronounced them married, and Emily kissed her husband in a government building that smelled like floor polish and old paper, and it was perfect. They went to dinner afterward, the four of them celebrating with good wine and better food. Marcus gave a toast that was surprisingly sweet. Caroline cried a little, which she blamed on the wine. Emily laughed more than she had in months, her hand in Adrian's, the ring on her finger still strange and wonderful. Later, alone in Adrian's apartment that was now technically their apartment, Emily stood at the windows overlooking the river and tried to process how much her life had changed. A year ago, she'd been invisible, overlooked, convinced she didn't matter. Now she was married to one of the most powerful men in New Orleans, running a successful business, making art she was proud to claim as her own. Adrian came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking? That I should probably pinch myself to make sure this is real." "It's real." "I know, that's the terrifying part." She leaned back against him. "A year ago, if someone had told me this is where I'd be, you wouldn't have believed them. No, I would have thought they were crazy." She turned in his arms to face him. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did, for giving me a chance, for loving me enough to let me figure out who I was supposed to be." "You figured that out yourself. I just removed some obstacles." Emily smiled. "You threatened my father and bought me a warehouse. That's a little more than removing obstacles." Semantics. He kissed her forehead. "What do you want to do now, Mrs. Wolfe?" The name still sounded strange. She'd decided to keep Carter professionally. Emily Carter Atelier had brand recognition now, but legally she was Emily Wolfe. It would take getting used to. "Now," she said, "I want to keep building. The atelier, the production facility, maybe eventually a school where I can teach people who love baking the way I do. I want to create things that matter and put my name on them and never apologize for taking up space." "Sounds perfect." "What about you? What do you want?" Adrian considered the question seriously. "I want to watch you succeed. I want to make sure nothing stands in your way. I want to build something legitimate. Use what I have to create opportunities for people who need them, the way I created an opportunity for you." "Going respectable on me?" "Considering it. Might take a while." His smile was slight. "Old habits are hard to break." They stood at the window together, watching the city lights reflect off the river, and Emily felt something settle in her chest. This was it. This was her life now, complicated and unconventional, and absolutely hers. The atelier thrived. Within a year, Emily had opened a third location in Baton Rouge, then a fourth in Biloxi. She'd written a book about cake design that became a surprise bestseller. She'd appeared on morning shows and Food Network segments, always slightly uncomfortable on camera, but increasingly confident in her expertise. She'd hired 50 employees across all locations. She'd started a foundation that gave scholarships to culinary students who couldn't afford school. She'd become someone whose opinion mattered in New Orleans food culture, someone whose name carried weight. And through it all, Adrian was there, not managing or controlling, just supporting. He'd gone increasingly legitimate, as he'd promised, still operating in gray areas, still someone people feared, but channeling that influence into real estate development and business ventures that helped the city more than they hurt it. They'd bought a house together in the Garden District, ironically just 2 blocks from where Emily had grown up. She'd worried it would feel like returning to old wounds, but instead, it felt like reclaiming territory. Taking space in a neighborhood that had once made her feel invisible and making it hers on her own terms. Her family remained at a distance. Robert had lunch with her occasionally, awkward meals where they talked about business and avoided anything deeper. Margaret had warmed up slightly after the wedding, though they'd never be close. Ashley had sent a baby gift when her daughter was born. A beautiful hand-knit blanket with a note that just said, "Congratulations." Emily had sent flowers in return. It wasn't reconciliation, but it wasn't war either. It was just the appropriate distance between people who shared a last name but not much else. On the 2-year anniversary of walking away from Ashley's wedding, Emily stood in the original Chartres Street atelier, looking at the cake she'd just finished, a 5-tier masterpiece for a couple who'd commissioned her specifically, who'd said they wanted something beautiful from the woman who makes art out of sugar. It was perfect. Hand-painted magnolias cascading down each tier, lemon honey filling that would taste like sunshine, buttercream so light it barely registered on the tongue. Exactly what she'd envisioned, executed flawlessly. And this time, her name was on it. Emily Carter, clear and proud and undeniable. Mia stuck her head in from the front. "Your husband's here." Emily smiled at the casual way Mia said it, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Send him back." Adrian appeared, still in a suit from whatever meeting he'd been in, and stopped when he saw the cake. "That's beautiful." "Thank you. You're beautiful." He crossed to her, kissed her softly. "Ready to go home?" "Almost. I just need to—" She stopped, looked at the cake, at the atelier, at everything she'd built. "Yeah, I'm ready." They walked out together, Emily's hand in Adrian's, leaving the atelier in Mia's capable hands. The sun was setting over the French Quarter, painting everything in shades of amber and rose, and Emily felt the kind of peace she'd never thought possible. She'd walked away from everything familiar to build something true. She'd claimed her name, her space, her right to exist loudly and unapologetically. She'd loved someone dangerous and been loved back with a fierceness that still took her breath away. She'd done it. She'd become someone who mattered, not because her family finally saw her, not because society validated her, but because she'd decided she was worth the investment, and she'd refused to accept anything less than what she deserved. Emily Carter Wolfe, baker, businesswoman, wife to a man most of New Orleans feared and all of New Orleans respected, owner of a thriving empire built on sugar and determination and the radical act of refusing to be small. She was done being invisible, and she was never going back,